teller to cash your chips, and the teller window is closed. In the book, Jacob Silverman, who wrote the book with me, we look at two guys who are trading on the biggest crypto exchange at the time and still now, called Binance, this global crypto exchange. There's a guy in Australia and there's a guy in Toronto. And on this one particular day, I believe it's 2022, they are, one of them is long, one of them is betting the price of crypto is going to go up, and one has gone short and is betting it's going to crash. Well, the price starts crashing. And the guy who's long is trying to get out because you see the value of his holdings dropping like crazy, and he's just trying to get out. The guy who's short is just trying to cash out to get some of his winnings.
Sure.
Well, they're going to the website and they're clicking the button, and it's not working. The exchange shut down, which is really interesting.
You're talking about Binance, which is the biggest one.
The biggest one, and it's completely shut down. This has happened many, many times over the course of crypto history. The price goes down and the exchange is shut down. And they come, it takes a lot, I forget how long it takes, but I think it's hours, and it comes back up and they're both liquidated. The guy who was long is just immediately liquidated. Yeah. Actually, I guess the guy who was short wasn't liquidated, but he'd seen the value of his crypto. The price, when the exchange went online again, the price went back up. So the guy that was short also lost. The guy who was long lost and the guy who was short lost. And I think that's just such a vivid illustration of the sort of fraudulence that we're talking about here.
And it reminds you when like the Robinhood app would, in the midst of, people holding on to AMC or whatever, like would suddenly make it so that nobody could buy and sell anymore. And you do think, oh, they're in league with someone. But Ben, what in your mind, as you're describing this technology, which is unwieldy and doesn't necessarily fix a problem. Maybe it helps people in a repressive regime escape, or maybe it helps people kind of hold assets if their country is unstable or volatile financially, if they have hyperinflation or whatever that is. So maybe there are certain uses at certain times that can be done. Why are people like BlackRock and Morgan and these like behemoths then validating this?
Because it's Wall Street, and they're not taking a directional bet on it. They're just facilitating the trade.
Oh, they're saying, let us be the house.
Yeah.
If we're going to catch the rake, let us be the house.
Yeah. I mean, to give you an example. So let's say you buy Bitcoin through an ETF, these exchange traded funds, where you're basically, it's sort of like a mutual fund. Like you put money in and you're going to get a fractional part of a Bitcoin. But,
so those have already been put into ETFs? Bitcoin, yeah. Like, okay. All
and
right.
it's like $100 billion market or something already, which is terrifying if you think of it as like, yeah, it's insane. So if you buy it through BlackRock, let's say, you buy your Bitcoin through a BlackRock ETF, all BlackRock is doing is taking your money, going to Coinbase, these crypto exchange, and saying, hey, here's the money, and you hold a piece of Bitcoin. BlackRock never even touches the Bitcoin. It's just facilitating the trade. So Wall Street is happy to do this and take a tiny, fee for their service.
Well, doesn't that blow up the whole decentralization of this whole thing anyway? If the whole idea of it is peer-to-peer, or you don't have to worry about the governments of the world, to have fucking BlackRock involved.
I mean, the democratized, decentralized future of money brought to you by BlackRock?
Right.
What are we talking about? This is nonsense. This is total nonsense. No, I mean, so many of these arguments that they make are so flimsy, and they contradict themselves so often. I mean, the ultimate irony that the democratized, decentralized future of money needs the president of the United States to be its pitch guy. Like it was down and out after 2022.
Really?
These guys were going to jail. The price was down.
What happened in 2022 that caused? Because it was, listen, Bitcoin, if you were one of those guys that, in the early adopters are like, I've got 1,000 Bitcoin in a wallet and it's worth $40,000. But then Bitcoin goes up over, I don't know, 100,000, 110, whatever it got up to. And suddenly these guys are billionaires. And then it plunges again. What plunged it? Was it Sam Bankman-Fried? Was it the collapse of an one of those
exchanges, or
or the exchanges? Yeah.
Hard to say. Any collapse is hard to know sort of, what the first butterfly to flap its wings was.
Right. Especially in something that you don't think is really tied to any kind of intrinsic value.
Yeah, but
Right.
basically an enormous amount of speculation and leverage had built up inside of crypto. Where, to give you an example, Binance was allowing 125 to 1 leverage for a retail trader. Like a regular guy could borrow $125 against every $1 that he put in.
Wow.
Yeah, which sounds fun if it's going up. But if it's going down.
But also put that in, like, I think the 2008 financial crisis was caused by like banks going 30 to 1 on leverage.
Yeah.
Like, not like, so think about that in the, and the collateralized obligations that came in after Dodd-Frank brought that, even that down by like half.
Yeah. And we're talking about, many multiples of that.
Right.
So when so it pumps it up, the leverage helps the pump up, but when the leverage starts to correct and go down, it speeds that up process up too, as people are constantly trying to sell these worthless currencies. I'm using air quotes, worthless currencies, and there's not enough buyers to actually buy them. So this happens a lot. And that's why you saw an enormous number of crypto companies go bankrupt in 2022. But what happened in 2024 is Trump's embrace of it said to people, well, look, he's a good chance he's going to be president. He came out publicly in the summer of 24, probably 50-50 shot. And if he is president, he can do a lot to pump this thing up, and people will see that. So I need to buy now. So the price started to go up, went up more and more and more. And by the time he's in office, it's $120,000 a coin. It's the highest it's ever been.
And that's across only Bitcoin. That's not including, I don't know if it's Ethereum or whatever else. That's literally, Bitcoin is 125. And do the other coins follow Bitcoin? Like, if Bitcoin goes up, do the other coins and other exchanges also go up, or that they're not necessarily tied to each other?
Not necessarily, but there is a broad
halo effect on it.
Yes, okay. I would say, which is sort of interesting to look at if you're trying to understand how the market works. But I really have come to think of these cryptos as the story that you're going to get rich. For the retail public, this is the story you're going to get rich on this stuff.
Sure.
So in economics, that's called greater fool theory.
You never want to be a part of greater fool theory when it comes to money.
Well, it's when the price of a speculative asset rises so much that it's really unlinked from any value it could have in the real world. It's not based on its value. It's based on the value you expect other people to give it. So you're constantly trying to sell, you buy the thing thinking you could sell it for more to a greater fool than you, which is a fun game until you end up on the top and you're the biggest idiot left holding the bag. It's a fundamentally unsustainable dynamic, but they can last for a long time. And there's also these things. I'm a big behavioral economist guy. That's really my bag. And Robert Shiller, famous behavioral economist, talks about naturally occurring Ponzi schemes. And
does that involve tulips by any chance?
Yeah, exactly. Same dynamic. Somebody, some product, something gets a value. The price is starting to go up. People see the price going up, which draws them in, which sends the price further and draws more people in. And these things can last for a very, very long time. But if they are actually Ponzi schemes, if there isn't actually a product underneath, I mean, at least with tulips, there was a flower. With this, you're talking about lines of computer code. Eventually they
But that's what I mean by, like, this whole system appears to be a funhouse mirror of our actual financial system, which includes all of these kinds of downsides, some speculative assets that seem to rise in value in ways that don't connect, big actors that come in and make transaction fees that, payment for order flow, all these different ways that our system is skimmed and tries to avoid regulation and creates the lack of trust in the system that you check your final that allows this parallel system to flourish, because people are so frustrated, especially on the retail side, by our actual system.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think crypto should force us back.
That's what she said.
What's in the system? If we're going to learn anything from this, it's not that crypto's the way, right? That is, it's worse than our regulated system, which is saying a lot. But it is saying we need to fix these underlying. I mean, the fact that so many, particularly young guys, that they really can't get it.
Nice car.
Perfect. It's a real feeling that these guys are having. Like, how am I going to afford a house, right? How am I going to?
And those exploitative aspects of our actual market are real.
Very much so.
You know, we're not all operating on the same information. There are guys that purchase real estate so they can have microwave towers next to it so that they can make transaction money. It's not the crypto whale that creates volatility selling back and forth to anonymous IP. Talk about that, because that to me is such an interesting phenomenon in this online world, which is
fake trading or wash trading, I guess.
Right.
It's because the pseudonymity of the blockchain obscures who's trading what. You can basically take $1 in one hand and flip it to the other and back and forth and bid up.
That's a Beavis and Butthead episode. Beavis and Butthead had 20 chocolate bars, and Beavis had $1, so he gave Butthead the $1. Butthead gave him a chocolate bar, and then with the $1, he bought the other one. And by the end of it, all the chocolate is gone, and they still just have $1.
Mike Judge.
Mike Judge.
Are you sure about that?
There's also a very funny Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode about the guys create a currency, but it's like a Ponzi scheme. They can't figure it out. Anyway, so you can basically make it look like there's a real market for the coin, and you're bidding the price of the coin
This
up.
is so much cancer
all you're trying to do
that
is
I can
lure
feel the tumors
actually
growing on my back.
into this thing,
and it's way down heavy on me, and it's not okay.
You're paying like the tiny fee that it costs to do the trade. And quite frankly, there's a lot of evidence that the exchanges at least have been in on this action, right? Like they're
oh, really? Even the bigger exchanges?
Yeah, in the past. I don't want to say anyone in specifically, but
fucking bullshit.
I mean, to give you an example of how weird it is, with
bullshit.
Sam Bankman-Fried's company, he had an exchange at FTX, which everyone knew about, but he also had a trading firm called Alameda Research, and they were in the same building, on the same floor, right next to each other in the Bahamas. And his ex-girlfriend was running I'm using air quotes for that, was the CEO of the trading firm, and Sam was running the exchange. I mean, in a regulated market, I mean, you can't get away with that. That is such a blatant conflict of interest.
But it's not so far off from Citadel. It's not so far off from a guy running all of the orders, having, I don't know, 40% of all the flow orders on Wall Street and having his own fund. Like that does occur even on I guess that's my point is it may be a Potemkin village, but it's mirroring very real conflict of interest and other things, even within our regulated system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a bizarro version of it, right? It just sort of takes that even further in terms of the, information asymmetries, in terms of the manipulability. That's not a word.
Right.
The ability to manipulate the market.
Is there anything worth saving on this? Do you securitize it? What do you do
I think you do two things. I mean, if I were, king of the world for a day, I would say, securitize all the speculative ones. The reason that the crypto industry doesn't want, they sort of were randomly categorized as commodities in like 2015. And it's a very sort of strange, fluky thing where they were selling futures, and because they hadn't been classified as a security, the CFTC, the Commodities Future Trading Commission, could claim that they were commodities, monies, real money.
Like oil, oil
exactly.
And soybean. Okay.
And currencies. Currencies are classified as commodities as well.
Okay.
So that's their argument. And the crypto market was so small at that time that I don't think a lot of people were paying attention.
Right.
But if you look at them, as we've discussed, they really operate like securities. And the crypto industry is so terrified of having their products classified as securities because securities law is predicated on disclosure. You need to know who you're giving your money to. and what they're doing with the money. And crypto doesn't want that, right?
Right.
So there's a bill that is threatening to pass Congress that would put cryptos under the supervision of the CFTC. And that's the same thing Sam Bankman-Fried wanted when he was spending time on Capitol Hill in 2021 and 2022.
Now, why did he want that bill?
Gee, I don't know. I mean, you want so the reason you want the CFTC in charge is not just because of the disclosure of securities, but also the CFTC is the smaller, weaker regulatory agency.
Rather than the SEC.
The SEC is stronger by comparison. And
Right.
by the way, just to point out something that's really glaringly, it's such a huge problem in our system. We're the only country in the world that separates our securities regulation from our commodities regulation and puts them in rival agencies competing over jurisdiction.
Wow.
With rival committees in the House.
You'd almost think it would weaken both.
You might. I mean, it just creates all these perverse incentives because the committees that oversee these agencies in the House and the Senate, people want positions on the committees so that they can get the donations from the industries that they're supposedly regulating.
And these crypto guys have not been shy. I mean, there's that infamous dinner at Mar-a-Lago where the buy-in was an insane amount of money to get to sit in a room with Donald Trump and let him talk about how we're not going to regulate you at all.
Yeah. If you bought the top, whatever it was, 10, 25 holders of his coin, got access to the president. I mean, what are we talking about?
Here's what's so fascinating about this, because if you look at it sort of under the absurdity microscope, so the president of the United States, Donald Trump, comes in and legitimizes this cryptocurrency world. It gives it access to the most powerful office, maybe in the entire world. But the example of his own entree into that business is a meme coin where almost everyone got fucked.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the people that bought into that coin got fucked, and Trump walked away with millions and millions of dollars. How is that not example number one of everything that would be wrong? And why wouldn't the industry speak out about that?
Because they need him.
He left every retail person holding the bag.
Yeah, but the guys who put a lot of money in, they quote unquote lost the money, but they got access to the president. So they got something for their investment, right?
Or were they were they front running and they actually ended up making money?
I'm sure some of them were, but the insiders always benefit in crypto. That's really the repetitive theme. Is like,
although that's the whole
it's
system.
true as a regulated system. It's just more pronounced, I would say, taken to another level in crypto.
Right.
The irony to me that we have a convicted fraudster president, right? A guy who's convicted of 34 counts, or his organization is
right,
that he ran his company 34 counts by a jury, is now hawking the fraudulent coin. And the people who believe in decentralization and democratization really, really need to stay on his good side.
Right.
It's really delicious, I have to say, on a dark, dark level. It's funny.
Now, do you see this then as I don't know where Bitcoin is. What is it around? 40,000?
7.
Oh, it's 70?
Yeah, it's in 70s. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So it's still wild. If you were in early, it's wildly valued. Like those people still make. What then would cause this to go up again other than some sort of, I don't know. Is it that the supply would run out? And like, why would it elevate anymore?
It'd be hard to, there's so many reasons there. It's hard to say. I think what has happened while we're focusing on the price of Bitcoin, that's kind of like the bright shiny object that sort of distracts us. What's happening on the other side is these stable coins are growing like crazy. There's hundreds of billions of dollars.
Now, when you say stable coins, talk, what is the meaning of stable coin?
It's supposedly a stable cryptocurrency whose value is pegged 1-to-1 with a real currency like the US dollar.
Okay. So it's not a meme coin. These aren't the ones where like Elon Musk throws a picture of a dog on a coin, the thing rockets up, and then, whoever is one of the whales or whoever the people that are front running make a shit ton of money and everybody else gets fucked. This is actually pegged. So this is an attempt to peg it to a real currency to, I guess, get the advantages of low fees and transactions and the ability to move between borders. Is that their fix?
Without going through a bank. Yeah.
Stable coin is an attempt to fix some of the more egregious problems within crypto world.
Yeah, if you want to avoid, if you're a criminal and you've gotten something of value, you're trying to send it somewhere else to sort of launder your money or to I don't know, engage in some transaction with another criminal on the other side of the world, you'd rather not have the volatility of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, right? Because you could be on the losing end of that. You'd rather have something that's stable that you can send.
So unless that currency has high volatility, it's not going to be like we're at 120, now we're at 90, now you're not going to have that rocket ship.
Yeah, you'd rather use something that's quote unquote stable. And so these stable coins have grown, enormously. And to give you example of how intricate this system is, it's things like Russian oligarchs selling sanctioned oil to the Chinese in the form of crypto to buy drones to send to Ukraine. I mean,
wow.
It is wild.
That's the silkiest road of all.
It is. I mean, you're talking about last year, a crypto organization crypto company estimated that $154 billion of illicit activity was financed via cryptocurrency. 154 billion last year, and that was a crypto company that made the estimate.
Here's what's fucking crazy about that. So Donald Trump is literally shilling for the product that allows our enemies to avoid our sanctions. Is that what this ultimately?
Yes.
Wild.
It's wild. And to give you an example of how deep the corruption goes, the biggest stablecoin company by far is this company Tether. And Tether, their broker is Cantor Fitzgerald, and Howard Lutnick was the commerce. Yes, that's how. I mean, guys, we're talking about
through Tether.
Yes,
and who knows what's actually going on because you said it's synonymous. But is it possible that through Tether, Russian oligarchs are moving oil to? Let's make it worse, moving Iranian oil to China in exchange for drones and weapons.
Well, it's not possible. It happened. It does happen. I mean, if you can read stories about this.
And Howard Lutnick profits from that.
Or his kids, technically, because he's technically not but I mean, come on, what are we talking about? Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Oh, yeah. And then, I mean, can we talk about Jeffrey Epstein for a second?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think you're allowed to. Yeah. So, was he an early crypto dude? Is that what that was?
Yes.
So his sex trafficking was enabled by that same system.
One can assume. I mean, we don't have evidence of it because, again, pseudonymity of the ledger, and who knows? But what we do know,
and redactions.
But here's what we know: we know in the emails that Epstein was funding something called Bitcoin Core Development, which is the group of programmers, software engineers who maintain Bitcoin's operating system. Yes, there are people behind this supposedly, completely computerized future. So he was funding that through the MIT Media Lab. You remember the MIT Media Lab? There was a blow up some years ago, a big article in the New Yorker. It's like this offshoot of MIT. This guy, Joy Ito, was running, and they had relationships with a lot of very wealthy people, including Bill Gates, and funding various projects. So Epstein was basically keeping the Bitcoin system alive in 2015 at a point when it was kind of languishing. Silk Road had been shut down. There was a lot of fighting. And why would Jeffrey Epstein like crypto? Well, if your main businesses are blackmail and money laundering,
we have buried the lead here, Ben. We have spent a good amount of time parsing what all this stuff means. And now we're in the good stuff, which is, and how is it deployed to undermine our society? And this feels, this feels Watergate-y times a million.
there's too many directions to go, and there's too much corruption. It's like I feel like Charlie Day and Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I got the pens on the board.
Right,
I got
right,
the
right.
thing,
You're
and I got
going
the,
a beautiful mind. You're gonna
it's a beautiful
mind it.
Yeah. And to give you another example, that guy who's supposedly Satoshi, the guy that hates me, the guy had him
Yes.
back, who called me a crisis actor. His company, Blockstream, received an investment from Jeffrey Epstein. We also learned that in the files.
What?
There's an email from his whoever started the company with Adam and Joy Ito confirming Epstein's investment in their company. Back says no, that didn't happen, but there's an email.
Right.
People can read it for themselves and judge whether.
But here's the other fucking crazy thing. Lutnick lived right next door to the guy.
Yes. And visited him on the island. There's pictures. They tried to hide that. There's a picture of them on the island together.
But this is where, boy, I like, okay, that guy is now the poster child of this, corrupt Silk Road in real life system of depravity and degradation and exploitation and all those different things. But you're also talking about people at the highest levels of our government right now enabling a system that fuels the very types of weapons that are killing our own soldiers.
Yeah.
Like, that's unforgivable.
It is. I was so angry when he unsanctioned that Russian oil, when he decided, oh shit, I fucked up. I went into Iran without a plan. And who could have predicted the price of oil would go up when you start a war around the Strait of Hormuz? And then he does unsanction the oil. And the Russians at the same time were, there's been a lot of reporting this, were providing intelligence to the Iranians to kill our guys over there, right? They were trying to help the guys we're fighting against, and we're rewarding them by unsanctioning their oil.
This is fucking madness.
Mhm.
And the whole selling point of this thing is it will allow poor people to avoid those financial fees of international transactions. It will allow dissidents to still be able to live and pay for certain things, even though their governments are repressive. But what it really is oligarchs and arms dealers and corporate titans controlling a black market of war and degradation around the globe. That's really what it's been most utilized for.
That's the majority. Yes, an overwhelming majority. Of course, you're never going to get a statistical breakdown because, again, pseudonymity of the ledger. It's purposefully trying to be obtuse.
So on Tether, could you go on Tether and track whether there are transactions between illicit oil shipments and weapons?
If they gave you access to their blockchain,
But they don't have to do that.
Well, I don't
And
know.
we
I'd leave
would-
that to a lawyer. They have on occasion when forced to by law enforcement, when sort
Right.
of like threatened with, well, if you don't do this, we're going to go after you. They have given over certain limited, clients of theirs. Their rationale for this is, look, we don't, money can be used, regular money can be used for all sorts of bad things. We're just issuing the coin. People can buy and sell it. We don't control what they do with it, kind of a thing. It's preposterous because article after article after article goes specifically to this company, Tether, and specifically to all of the different ways in which it can be used to finance criminal activity. We're talking about global criminal cartels, South American drug cartels, but also Chinese triads, but also, ISIS, but also North Korean hackers.
So this is in a way, in the way that the U.S. dollar has been utilized as a weapon, the weaponization of, because we are the global currency, the way that we weaponize that is through sanctions on petrodollars or the oil system or any of those other things. And the way they get around it is the exchange that is owned by our Secretary of the Treasury's company. That is what we are.
The stablecoin company. Yeah. Yeah. They have an exchange too. But yes, the stablecoin company is represented. Their financial interest is represented by our Commerce Secretary.
I don't know how that's not. Well, I don't know why we're talking. I don't know how that's two idiots in a podcast talking about that. And that is not a global corruption scandal and crisis.
It is so. I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and you have your high moments and your low moments. But,
Right.
The reason that Lutnick came on Trump's radar is all of a sudden he was raising money for him in his campaign, right? He was the co-chair.
Right.
And there's all these stories from the summer and fall of 2024 about these incredibly lavish fundraisers where Lutnick would host him and they would raise, $1 million a head or whatever to go into their super PACs. And, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, that some of that money that the money is given with the expectation that there will be something in return.
Right.
And what's been given in return under the Trump administration for crypto is they disbanded the cryptocurrency crime task force that the DOJ had set up. They've ripped apart the SEC. Hundreds have left the SEC. They've gotten this bad bill through Congress called the Genius Act that allows corporations to issue their own money in the form of stablecoins. That's what the Genius Act does.
Wait, what?
Literal corporate money. Yes.
So corporations, not only are they people, not only is their speech protected now by the First Amendment and their money is considered speech, they are also their own nation states with their own currencies.
Yes. Yes. And I want to say 100 Democrats voted for this legislation, including Hakeem Jeffries and my congressman, Dan Goldman, which is why I'm supporting Brad Lander for Congress. But I am outraged that the Democrats, because they're so fearful of the crypto lobby, which has so much money, and they do have an enormous amount of money to spend.
Clearly.
Clearly.
I don't want to say where they got it from, but clearly
exactly.
They do.
Exactly. In 2024, to give you a sense of how big this is, it was $240-something million, and it was 40-something% of all corporate donations in the cycle came from crypto, from the crypto industry and the companies, the players inside, the individuals and the companies. 40% of all the money. That's like more than the defense industry and the pharmaceutical industry combined. It's crazy.
And how is this not the bubble of all bubbles then?
It might be. I mean, I describe it in the movie as the largest Ponzi scheme in history. I didn't know it was going to come back and reinflate, but sometimes that does happen.
But has it in some ways been reinflated even? So now the question is, has it been reinflated by what you call the fool theory, or has it been reinflated by international money laundering?
Both.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the scary part to me is that crypto is notoriously volatile. It seems as though we are getting close to being in a recession, if not there already. We are certainly slowing down a lot economically. And this war is such a disaster already that it seems like inflation isn't going away anytime soon. If the economy goes down, then, traditionally, historically, if there's a correction, the most speculative things fall the fastest. And if you think crypto is only speculation, as I do on the retail side, what happens when these ETF holders try to sell? You could sell $1 billion worth of these ETFs, but let's say you tried to sell $10 billion in a day, and there aren't enough buyers on the other side. And the whole thing collapses, just like it did in 2022, but instead, it's now tied into our regulated system. Now all of these Wall Street firms are in on it. Now, they're getting banking licenses.
So now it's a subprime contagion.
They recreated the thing that was created in opposition to subprime has effectively recreated subprime.
Ah!
And there's not even homes involved. Like there's not even like.
So it would crypto be a hedge? Like if the actual financial system falls, does crypto function similarly to like gold and silver? Does it then hold value as a hedge against societal collapse? Because somehow it's an intrinsic value item that isn't tied to any of this other shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the pitch.
Right.
And if you go deep, like the hardcore crypto people, and that's a very small group of people, but the hardcore ones are sort of anarcho-capitalist guys who are like, we kind of want the system to fall apart and then we'll be saved by our Bitcoin. That's pretty crazy. That's really pretty crazy. But historically, what's happened when inflation goes up is that crypto goes down. That's what happens in 2022 in the film, is the inflation had started to... So crypto really took off during the pandemic because there were all these stimulus checks. People were sitting at home, guys, they needed something to gamble on.
Looking to go to the moon, right?
Yeah. So that happened. But of course, then the result of the easy money was inflation. And when that became sort of unavoidable, the Fed, or undeniable, the Fed had to raise interest rates. And right around when the Fed raised interest rates in March of 2022, crypto was just nosediving. Just, dropped by half or something in the span of 6 months. So I hope it doesn't happen again, but if history's any guide, it will.
Well, the reason why it might not is because if you think about it in that way, crypto is in some ways an ETF of black market goods. If it's an ETF of the illicit markets, it's an ETF of gun running and drug running and sex trafficking and all the ways that international, cartels will avoid the regulated system. Does it ever have to reconvert? If you're moving crypto, and is it a barter system and crypto is kind of the linchpin of it? It's not like they have to take that then and then reconvert it into, and I don't know if maybe they do this with stablecoin, reconvert it into actual currency.
Yeah, most of the time they do. And they do that through things like over-the-counter desks where people are actually getting dollars or whatever physical currency in the form of bills for. So a lot of the transactions that are actually occur in crypto don't happen on the ledger. You can have off-ledger transactions, which further obscures the identity of who's transacting. You can give somebody, I could give you $50 and you could give me your crypto coins, right? And so
that would be their version of dark pools.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And so most of the time you do need to get into a real currency on the other side, but not necessarily. There is this sort of digital, what's the system in Southeast Asia? It is a way of sending something. If basically the criminals have reasonable assurance that they can transact with each other and get something that they want in exchange for something that they're selling, via this crypto stuff, then maybe they don't have to cash in, right? If the Russians sell the oil and get the drones, then maybe they never have to really cash out.
Do you have a sense at all of how much of this has been adopted by rogue states and how much of it is used to evade whatever we would call the kind of international rules-based order? How much of this system of payment is being utilized for those actions?
To give you one example, North Korea has teams of hackers that hack in and steal people's cryptocurrency. Half of the North Korean nuclear weapons program has been funded via cryptocurrency.
Are you fucking kidding me right now?
Wall Street Journal. Look it up. It's
Why
incredible.
is it? I don't understand this. This is blowing my mind.
Dude, it's so wild. It's so crazy. I mean, you get so depressed because you're like, can we, it feels like nothing's going to happen until Trump's out of office, right? Like,
and sure, but you just said 100 Democrats were like, hey man, it's cool. Yeah. Do they not know? Have there been government hearings on the actual usage of this stuff?
Well, there was one that I testified to, and then the crypto lobby spent $40 million defeating Sherrod Brown, the chairman of the committee. The chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, they spent $40 million
in that race.
In that race alone.
That's one Senate race in Ohio.
In Ohio. 40 million in Ohio goes pretty far. And they elected a literal car salesman instead, Bernie Moreno, who's pro-crypto. Shocker.
What?
No. Who yeah.
What?
So I don't think that, I mean, look, I would love to talk to an elected representative on camera who voted for it, who's a Democrat, and have him explain his deep understanding of blockchain technology. But I'm going to just take a wager, a guess. A wager actually might be the nice, appropriate way of phrasing this. They're afraid of him. They're afraid of him.
But even that, the fact that they don't separate out, let's say if there is value in these coins and they don't want to ultimately undermine whatever it may become or kinds of things, the idea that they wouldn't step in to prevent bad actors from using this very same thing to undermine the security of the United States is a mind-blowing proposition.
You talk a lot on the podcast about how the Democrats have really, the Democrats in power, the elites in power in the Democratic Party have made this decision, or a series of decisions starting from a while ago, and chosen capital over labor.
Man, yep.
And crypto is just like such a vivid illustration of that, right? This is a thing that's a net negative for people in general. Most people who invest in crypto are going to lose.
Well, it's unrelated to labor in any way, unless, of course, you work in a crypto mine. But it's unrelated to labor in any way. It's the purest form. It's like the Tron of capital.
Yeah. And they're choosing that side. I hear that there's that Clarity bill, which is trying to work its way through Congress. I hear that Chuck Schumer is pressuring there's a caucus that's sort of trying to figure out the Democrats' position on this, and he's trying to pressure them to agree to whatever deal the banks are coming up with the crypto companies to get this legislation through.
How do these banks not? How did they do they plead ignorance to what this is being utilized for? Like the way you laid it out of Russia and oil and weapons and drones, like, are they going to pretend that that's not the manner in which this is being utilized?
Yeah. I mean, as long as they can make money on it, I feel like. Yeah. Right now, what's funny is that one of the things the crypto companies want, the crypto exchange Coinbase in particular, is it wants to be able to offer interest to people that put money in the form of a stable coin on their exchange. They want to be able to offer them interest, which sounds an awful lot like a loan, right? Like something that a bank would do. And the banks don't want them to be able to do this because that's cutting in on their core business. So there's a fight between the banks and the crypto companies. And when the banks are the good guys, when the banks are the ones that are holding the line and saying, well, we should have some rules, guys. There should be, a KYC and AML, and you're like, oh, we're so fucked.
Wow. This is bananas, Ben. It's really, I can see. How is this? Is this a full-time gig now? What are you going back to acting? Like what, or is this your white whale? Are you the Ahab, going after this?
I don't know. I'm so ready to go back to showbiz now.
Oh,
this has
beautiful.
been so. I miss people. I miss interacting with people on a set. No, I really. I mean,
I'm with you, man.
Writing books is lonely. Making documentary films is wonderful when you're shooting them, but so much of it is the post process, and it's virtual, and you're lonely. And I'm like, so yeah, I'm working on trying to get back into TV. I want to create a show and do that. I think crypto will be a part of my life, most likely, moving forward, and that's okay. I hope to continue to be an advocate and to talk about these things, and quite frankly, shame. I can't control the Republican Party. It sounds like no one can other than Trump. But if that's what we mean by control, I don't know, whatever that is, the free for all that's over there. But with the Democrats, I can at least speak up and speak out about.
And there's a possibility for influence. Are there other? I have found that celebrity gives you the opportunity to shine a light, but you also need allies. You need people who are the people in the trenches doing the day-to-day grunt work of advocacy. Do you have allies within that world that together you can form a really formidable kind of battalion to go after this?
I'm trying. I'm working on it. I know there are a lot of organizations. I've done some videos with More Perfect Union, the group started by Faz Shakur and a few others. I Americans for Financial Reform is a great organization that is really trying to protect consumers. One of the things that Trump has done, his administration has done, is just rip apart the CFPB, just destroyed it, sent in those Doge idiots, and they fired.
Well, they just defanged and defunded and pulled people, and that's their consumer protection is no longer.
Yeah. Well, that's not freedom, John.
That's a good point.
You need freedom.
Freedom to exploit.
Freedom to be screwed.
Right.
So I'm working with organizations like that. I would love to continue to work with others. But I do think it's going to take kind of a grassroots effort in order to all these people.
No question. And the idea that you could put that kind of shaming campaign, but have real stamina behind it so that they understand, it will be exposed and you won't be going away. I wish you well. It's a hell of a story. For those of you out there who would like to learn more about it, follow Everyone Is Lying Film on Instagram, or go to everyoneislying.com for updates on where it is or where the film is or any of those other things. Ben, geez, man, hell of a job, hell of a deep dive. He's the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Easy Money. You got to get it. It's a fascinating read, and Everyone Is Lying to You for Money, which is the documentary about this industry. Ben McKenzie.
John Stewart.
And say hello to your lovely wife. And
I will.
I look forward to seeing you also playing some kind of cop.
Indeed.
All right.
Inshallah. Thank you.
All right. Good
All
stuff.
Right, buddy.
Good talking to you.
Good talking to you too.
Guys, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What was so crazy? So I know we had to spend a lot of time just being like, and what is it again? Bitcoin? And then what's a stable coin? Like, there was a lot of remedial, like, what are the terms? How does this work? What do they say that it is? And then he was just like setting me up. He was just walking me down the street, like, oh, let me walk you down the street. You know what it felt like? The end of Planet of the Apes. We're having a nice time. Dr. Zaius is doing these things. And then all of a sudden I turn around and go, is that the fucking Statue of Liberty?
It was Earth the whole time.
Wait, what? Where are we?
Yeah, you can really tell he's been sitting with all of this, digging through the Epstein files, looking for clues. He's dedicated.
I told him, I said, you're not an actor who wrote a book. It's like you're an economist who happened to be in the OC. Like,
by the way.
OC. Yeah. I don't know anything about it. I don't know. I was trying to tell Tracy, I was like, I think he was on like Laguna Beach. And she's like, I think that's a documentary. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, he's on one of those.
Close.
Next week we'll have Laguna Beach.
Did you know anything about these? Like, when he said Cantor Fitzgerald has the leading interest in Tether, I was like, wait, because if that's being used to undermine our sanctions.
Yeah. I mean, it's even closer than that. I read something this morning in the Washington Post. I don't want to get it wrong, but it said Trump and his family made more in 4 months, the first 4 months of his second presidency, off of his meme coin, than 4 years running his Washington, D.C. hotel during his first presidency.
Whoa.
Like, that just shows.
But yeah, I mean, it's incredibly entangled with our financial system at this point.
Yeah.
And just sort of runs through, this decentralized form of currency just runs through all of our very central banks and is honestly like tied up too with our very real money.
But I remember, do you guys remember when we discovered like HSBC had money laundered for certain cartels?
Yeah, like in Iran and yeah.
Right. And the SEC and the DOJ never catch up with anything. And they're just like, oh, I'm sorry. Did we make $10 billion over that? Here's $2 billion. We're cool, right?
Yeah. So cool.
This is so much worse. If the titans and pillars of our financial industry are the very conduits to this black market economy that allows the United States enemies to evade any of our sanctions, what are we doing?
I mean, we ourselves are evading our sanctions. We're buying oil from Iran. Like, it's very, I don't know how serious any of this stuff is anymore.
Yeah, and I remember reading that last year, Iran's cryptocurrency cryptocurrency ecosystem grew to like nearly 8 billion. Like it's not small, the avoiding of sanctions, most likely. And I mean, we're the largest holder of Bitcoin at this point. So it's really a tool of states, and it's going to keep spiraling if all these politicians have no incentive to regulate.
And here's my guess. Even Khamenei wouldn't be so shameless as to create an Ayatollah coin. Even Khamenei would not. He would be like, look, I don't want to rip people off to that extent.
That seems a little scammy. Yeah.
I'm a crazed dictator who wants them to live but I would not. That seems
a bridge too far.
That's feels dirty. Just feels dirty to me. Fucking crazy. Brittany, what do people want from us this week?
Here we go.
Come on.
John, do you think presidents and governors should have the power to grant pardons?
Ooh. It depends on if I'm friends with them. I think I do think there is value within the pardon system. I just think it has to be done where you're like rod and reel fishing, not just throwing a net at and going, all right, 3,000 people, they're fine. But I mean, I would say the pardon, it just shouldn't be absolute, that there should be some process within the court system that can readdress those that are. And look, let's face facts. The Supreme Court has made it so that corruption no longer really exists in this country, unless it's like you write on a piece of paper and go, here's $10,000 and you have to do these three things. Like, unless it's such explicit quid pro quo. But I mean, the selling of pardons, the fact that money grants you access to our judicial system in that way. Don't rich people have enough of an advantage?
Give them more. Why not?
They're all satisfied.
Yeah.
I mean, would you guys get rid of it completely?
No. I mean,
No.
well, it's hard. I feel like now with the ways that we're seeing it so abused, it's like you would kind of rather that it just went away. But like there's such failures in the justice system that you want something to exist in that regard. But
right.
And
you do want to redress and think about what felonies do to a person's life. And you do want a system that allows for mercy and grace.
Absolutely. Yes.
I mean, I would love if it didn't have to go all the way to a presidential pardon or a governor's pardon in order to get that justice for people. But sometimes it does.
Oh, Jillian, I don't know what do the kids do now? They do this with their fingers on that. I'm giving you. Although, when I was a kid, this was just the way that you attacked your brother. All right. What else? What else, Brittany? What else?
John, is it just a coincidence that TDS stands for both The Daily Show and Trump Derangement Syndrome?
Yeah, listen, we were here first. That's all I'm going to say. These are my initials. If anything, this is copyright infringement that he is purporting on us. But we were here first, and it will always stand for The Daily Show.
John, do you think that with those initials and you possibly appearing in an image of Trump as maybe Jesus, that maybe someone's sending you a sign?
Listen, when I saw that image,
Yes,
and the people, it's a podcast. You can't see the image. There's the image of Trump as I'm sorry, he believes as a physician.
Yes.
By the way, wearing.
Robes.
It's literally the picture you always see of Jesus with the light in his hand healing somebody. But somehow Trump was like, I think that's from the pit. Like he's such a fucking, like he's such a lazy liar now. He doesn't even, he's that comfortable with us that the magic has gone from our relationship. He doesn't even try anymore when it comes to the lying. When I did see that image, I was like, wait, I know I don't look great.
It is uncanny, honestly.
When I saw it, that was you. And then when you brought it up, I was like, oh, good. It wasn't just me.
Can I tell you what's most upsetting about it? Is it's clearly an AI picture. So someone had to write in Trump as Jesus with eagles and fireworks and all this stuff. and just grab me a sickly looking man. Like that's clearly the prompt to AI was, and we need somebody in the bed. Somebody robust? No, no, no. Make it like somebody that looks like they're in a bed in need of divine healing.
Oh no.
Brutal.
And it's fucking exact. Like, it's not even, like, I really thought, like, did they use is that what that is?
It's very possible.
It is, right?
It's a little too close.
Somebody wrote
Yeah.
in healing John Stewart of his Trump derangement syndrome.
There you go.
Oh, that's what it was. So
Solved
that
it.
would make me feel better than random computer image of sickly man on bed that could use divine light. You know, the worst part about the whole thing is he was laying his hands on my head. His little Trumpy hands.
Yeah, so
That's
small.
not. I didn't need that aspect of it. And I love the people that I'm surrounded by on the bed.
Yeah.
The lady.
So hopeful.
I hope he's okay. He's so low on vitamin D. I hope he's okay.
I really couldn't believe how busy that image was. It was like Lisa Frank for MAGA. There's just like so much chaos.
So surprising. His taste is normally not garish in that. It literally is. Have you seen, by the way, a wonderful thing to do? Somebody should do a time lapse of the Oval Office since he's been in there, because he keeps
Right, I can put my shit back on now.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the Risky Business Features podcast. My name's Patrick Gray. Risky Business Features is a new podcast feed. If you are not subscribed to it already, I highly recommend that you do so. You can find it in your podcatcher via just searching for Risky Business Features. And the idea behind that channel is we get to publish some feature interviews in there where we won't really have room in the main channel to publish stuff like this. And today we are actually chatting with Nicholas Carlini, who works for Anthropic, and his talk at Unprompted some weeks ago about finding Ode with Anthropic was with Anthropic's models was, a sensation. And then of course, Mythos comes along hot on the heels of that, and Nicholas has been out there talking a great deal about that. So my colleague James Wilson and I decided to sit down with him and quiz him on all manner of stuff, and we recorded this interview this morning. So I will drop you in here, where Nicholas starts off by explaining what his actual job is at Anthropic, because it's all a little bit vague, right? He just sort of says, I do security research at Anthropic. And as you'll hear, that's kind of because he does security research at Anthropic. But here is Nicholas Carlini from Anthropic talking about frontier models, vulnerability discovery, and where all of this is going. I do hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I do security on Anthropic is the job, basically. I was brought here to try to understand what does it mean when you have very high quality models, and then you have to think about the security and privacy. Initially, this was a lot of prompt injection, jailbreaks, data poisoning. We had a bunch of these results come out, a little while after I joined, roughly a year ago. And so I got started in security, like proper security. I used to do, I wrote some papers on return-oriented programming. I was at Intel for a little bit. I did pen testing for a little while before that. And then I got into machine learning. And so I've always been interested in trying to combine the two fields. But for a long time, the only way that you could do this was by attacking the machine learning, because they were just pretty dumb models that you couldn't do anything with them. So you try and poison them and make them make mistakes. And then starting maybe a year and a half ago or so, I started trying to do security work with the models. And this wasn't really working very well. The models were still quite bad. But I don't know, maybe 6 months ago is when I really started to flip most of my job to be looking at the models in order to try and do security things with the models themselves, as opposed to attacking the models. So
your job at Anthropic is to really do research to work out the sort of security implications of the models, both from a testing them point of view, and also for what can they do point of view. So it's exactly. you this is an amazing job.
It's a very great job. Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, it's I try to think about what are the things that the models can do, and what should Anthropic be doing as a result of this? What defenses need to be put in place? What mitigations? What should we be concerned about for the next release of models? Things like this.
Okay, now speaking of the next release of models, the thing that everybody's running around with their hair on fire about is Mythos. Funnily enough, I spoke to a friend of mine who's a politician who's like, wow, this stuff has really cut through into policy circles. Everybody's flipping out. But it's interesting what you say about the latest releases, right? Because what I find funny about this is Mythos is only relevant. There's a saying in media, which is today's news is tomorrow's, you wrap tomorrow's fish and chips with today's newspaper, right? So I sort of feel like LLMs are a little bit the same, right? Which is Mythos is going to be king until the next model comes out in 3 to 6 months. And that was a theme in your talk that I don't think people focused on quite enough, right? Which is you were sort of talking about Moore's law and eventually, tapering and computational power. And you're expecting a similar thing to happen with LLMs, which is they're growing at this really rapid clip in terms of their capabilities, and eventually there'll be a bend. Eventually that sort of growth in capability is going to start rolling off, and depending on where that happens, really depends what sort of world we wind up living in, right? To a degree,
Yep.
in security at least, and with this vulnerability research. So I want to ask about something very specific you said in that part of the discussion in your talk, though,
Sure.
which is you said, look, stuff like Mythos, the current frontier models, you could be running on your laptop in a year. Is that realistic? Is it realistic that you could have something that powerful? Because a big part of the pushback we've seen against some of these bugs found by Mythos is like, oh, wow, yeah, congratulations, you found a null pointer dereference in OpenBSD and it cost you $20,000 in tokens. Like, big whoop, like that ain't good value for money. But if you're telling me you could run that on your iPad in a year and replicate that result without spending 20K in tokens, well, that's very different, right? So give me tell me about your feelings there.
Okay. Okay. Let me first answer a question you didn't ask, and then we'll come back to the question you did ask. So, okay, $20,000 for a crash. This is correct insofar as we ran the model many, many times. I don't remember exactly, but something like 1,000 times. It cost in aggregate $20,000. One of those bugs was null pointer dereference that would let us crash any OpenBSD machine that was listening on TCP. And this is the one that we decided to talk about. But we have, a huge pile of other bugs that are still there. Many of them are valid. Most of them are valid. And we didn't talk about those. So yes, when people say $20,000 for one bug, this is, I don't know, somewhere between slightly and mostly misleading. For example, after people went and started having this discussion, I started crawling through the pile a little bit more. And I took the second bug. Okay, so the model ranked them all for me and said, like, here's what I think is the most severe bug, and that was the one that I filed here. The second bug on the list, I started looking at, and OpenBSD recently patched it. It gives me complete local code, it's a complete local privilege escalation vulnerability that the model wrote for me. Unprivileged user gets me root on the machine. Which it took the model, more time to turn that into an exploit, but the bug that it found was exploitable in this way, and that's from the same stack of the $20,000. So, as I spend more time or just ask the model to write more exploits, I'm sure that number will go down quite a lot. Okay, so that's a question you didn't ask. Let me go back to the question you did ask, which is, will you be able to replicate this again with open weight models? Relatively consistently, the cost of intelligence, air quotes, has gone down something like 10 to 100x year over year. The models that we release now, like the Haiku class models now, are roughly as good as something like the Opus class models from like a year and a half before that. These models get really good. The open weight models that exist are, consistently between, let's say 3 and 12 months behind the best models that the Frontier Labs put out. And so it's currently true that I can run a model on my laptop that was roughly Frontier capabilities from 6 to 12 months ago. Now, it's a big model, right? It's not, the easiest thing to do. Also, my laptop, has lots of RAM, and so it fits. It's not just a 16 gig sort of thing, but it can be done, and I expect this will continue for a little while. I think there's a question of is there some minimum size that you can go down to? Maybe it's possible that you can compress a big thing into a small thing, but there's some information theory limit at the low end. I don't know if that's going to happen, but at least for the past couple of years, it's always been true that if you wait a couple of years, the thing that you can do just at the very, very high end becomes commoditized that people can do on their laptops.
And are you thinking that, these are large models and general purpose things, or do you think there's going to be increasingly open weight models that are very, very specifically targeting the cybersecurity domain?
Yeah, it's possible that you can target this. I think there's a spectrum of what targeting means. It really looks like, at least for the time being, just going for general raw capabilities is the way to go, right? We didn't train Mythos in particular to be good at security. We train on all of the stuff that exists that we can find. Some of that happens to be security relevant content, but no one was I want to make the super hacking machine, and I'm going to put in all the stuff to make sure it can write exploits, and we're going to write RL environments that teach it to do exploits on all of the operating systems. And we would just train the model in the normal way, and what falls out is this. You can definitely get more localized intelligence if you train for it. And so, like, I do think that, it's conceivable people will want to do this, especially if they want open weight models that might be a little less capable. They might want to push a little bit more on the jagged frontier on the security piece of it. But I really think that the way to go for at least how things are looking right now is just like make the best model, the most capable model you can, and then maybe do a little bit of specialization on security.
So you think this, I guess what I'm taking away from what you're saying here is that you think this argument that, LLM discovered security vulnerabilities are too expensive, you don't put much stock in that.
No.
Pushback, right.
Yeah, I think that, the LLM discovered vulnerabilities are already not that expensive. I mean, one of the big things people have really picked up on, which we didn't intend as much, was the fact that Mythos is finding these bugs. The big thing that we wanted to emphasize was that the model was exploiting these bugs. This, I think, is like the particularly challenging thing, right? Like I gave a whole talk at Unprompted on the bugs I found with Opus 4.6. We had a blog post in like February with like 500 bugs that we had found. We worked with Mozilla to find a bunch of bugs. Yeah, we can find a bunch of bugs with a bunch of models. The new thing is both the complexity of the bugs that we've been finding and the exploits. But yeah, this aside, I totally believe that we're going to have pretty good models that can replicate these kinds of behaviors.
Now, one thing that exploit developers have been saying to me since all of this, right, is look, there's entire classes of bugs that these things are just not going to be capable of finding. And I've been thinking about that myself, and I'm like, what is a language model good at, right? And it's a language model, and this is why, it applies really well to code. Code is a language, and, there's sort of a grammar there, and formal structures and things like that. And that's what LLMs are really good at, and these things are incredible, right? Like, as you say, you're asking it, write me an exploit for this, and it just goes, here you go. But then you ask it, should I walk or drive to the car wash? And it gets really confused. And I think that's the thing is like, you got to understand with these models is that they are language models. Fundamentally, they deal with language. And this is what makes them so fantastic at computer programming tasks and anything dealing with like, I guess, reviewing literature. And, they're really incredible at that. But fundamentally, they are language tools, right? So like, when it comes to finding things like logic bugs, do these models get there in the end, or are they inherently unsuited to it? And I'm kind of leaning towards the latter, and I wanted to see what you think of that.
You would hope. Turns out they're very good at this too. So we haven't emphasized these as widely yet because a number of these took a little bit longer to get patched. But we have found a huge number of bugs in cryptography libraries. The ones that have been patched most recently were in WolfSSL. We will probably have a blog post out at some point that talks about some of these in more detail, but we have found a large number of vulnerabilities. The most severe one in WolfSSL was the one that they triaged as critical, and CVSS scores are fake, but someone put I don't remember, one of the people said it was a CVSS score of 10, but so whatever. What the bug let us do is it let us forge arbitrary certificates. And the model both found the bug and exploited it. There was no memory corruption here. It has to do something with the intersection of there was a missing check of whether or not the certificate was actually doing the same hash function as you thought. And so you place a different hash function in place, and then it knows something about how elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman works, which allows it to, do the right things and smuggle the data through so that you can forge any certificate you want. And so it's very much just a pure logic bug, no fancy, memory corruption. We didn't have address sanitizer running, and it found this one just fine. And then we have many, many more like this that are coming. These ones took a little bit longer to get patched and for us to talk about them, and so we will, have some of these too. I don't expect that the model is going to fail on this class of bugs alone. Where
will it fail? I mean, the question really is come on, surely it can't be good at everything. It's not an omni, AGI researcher, right? It's got to have some blind spots.
Yeah, I totally think that it's possible that we'll have some blind spots, but okay, so put yourself 3 years ago, and let's suppose that you're, trying to predict what the models will be good at. Would you really have drawn the distinction between can find and exploit vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel, but yeah, surely the logic vulnerabilities, that's, that's going too far. Or, I could do this plus, find bugs in all the crypto libraries, but I don't know, time of check to time of use, that's going too far. Okay, well, we have those too. But so you can start making a list of all the things you might hope is one step too far, and one can hope, but at least at the moment, we have not yet a point. There is not yet a class of bugs that I have gone looking for, I have failed to find, is I guess the statement I would make. It's there may be something like this, but for almost any class of bug that I have found, for almost any piece of software that I've been looking for bugs in, we have succeeded.
Yeah, Liz, I was just curious about, before we started recording, we were sort of talking about some of the things that I've said that you disagreed with, and one of them was my assertion that a lot of the bug finding activities are already possible with existing models. And I wanted to delve a little bit into the difference between finding a bug and then realizing that bug is a primitive that you can chain together in a multi-step exploit. And also going off your observation there that you're yet to, come across a class of bugs it can't find. But is there a limit in the number of steps that it can chain together, or how many, steps in reasoning that a model can do at the moment?
Yeah, certainly they're not, they're not omnipotent yet. They have their limits. I
love how you said yet. Yeah,
sure. Yes.
Yeah.
They're better.
Very
than
reassuring, Nicholas. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're making all of the policy people listen to this feel very calm. You're soothing them.
Yes. No, you learn to say yet quite a lot when you work with these language models, because I don't know, I would never have thought that the models would have gotten this good. And so once you have said enough times, surely that is not possible, and you have been wrong, 5 or 10 times, you eventually just learn to caveat all of your statements with yet, because that at least is true at the moment. The models do have a limit on how far they can go for these exploits. In the blog post, we mentioned that in a number of cases, the model can get so far, and then it requires a small amount of human assistance to turn some of these into complete chains. So we have, for example, some full exploit chains on web browsers, and all of the exploit chains on web browsers required some amount of prodding to help the model out. And the prodding is a little bit simple. I don't know how to write a heap spray. I know in principle, I academically understand what this is. I've written papers on how to do data-only attacks. But if you sort of told me write a heap spray, I don't know how I would actually do this. But the model's very good at that. And then when it gets stuck, I can be have you thought about this idea? Or it would really help if you tried to add some layers of abstraction here. You're trying to do too much at once. Please write a function called run shellcode, and then use that as a primitive that lets you go and execute the next stage of your attack, as opposed to trying to chain together both the render or escape and the code execution within the render. And then the model's yes, good idea. And then it goes and does that and then moves on to the next step. And so the things that I'm helping it with are really sort of the high level advice on these things. And I see no reason why this is something that is not able, it wouldn't be possible for the models to figure this out in another generation or two.
Yeah. So look, we've covered, I think, the capability of the models and where they're headed. Now let's talk about what it means for a little bit, right? Because this week we did our weekly show. We had a good chat with Grok, International Man of Mystery, the Grok, and James and I recorded this week's news segment. And one of the things we talked about was, Mozilla has patched apparently 270 plus bugs that it found with Mythos as part of this, so-called Project Glasswing thing. And Grok's response to that was infinity minus 270 is still infinity. And, we had a bit of a discussion there, which is, and I think it's a valid point, right? Which is we've been saying before models, right? We've been saying since fuzzing, since manual research, that you can't just patch your way to a secure product. So ultimately, what does this change? I think it's going to increase the velocity of patching that enterprises and government departments and whatever have to deal with, right? So it definitely increases the velocity of patching, sort of, in a similar way to what happened when we had fuzzers first came along, for example. All of a sudden we got patches flying at us left and right. But I guess the question is, is anything fundamentally changing? And that seems to be a point that people are going back and forth on. I just wanted to get your take on that.
Sure. There's a bunch of ways that we can take this. So maybe to answer the question directly, no one knows. Like, it's possible that what happens is we find as many bugs as we possibly can, and there are a roughly finite amount of bugs, and you patch as many of them as you can, and then you're like pretty good for a little while. It's also possible that there's just a huge amount of bugs that we don't know exist, and the world is pretty painful for a little while, and it keeps being that way. I think maybe what I believe is something like, for every new attack technique you have, there is a difficulty level of how hard you have to work to find all of the bugs with that technique. So if you have a fuzzer, then lots of things that are memory corruption become very easy to find, but you're sort of going to have to work infinitely hard. You're never going to find any of the logic bugs, but you'll have to work very, very hard to find the bugs that are gated behind a checksum, because the fuzzer has to get extremely lucky for you to find those. With a language model, you can find more bugs, and so you might have to run it a lot longer, but it seems likely to me that we will probably exhaust some of the bugs classes that the model is really good at finding, and we'll be able to not find all of them, but find a very large number. We've run some of these models a bunch of times, and we have these curves that show you do hit diminishing returns when you run it enough, that the model doesn't just keep on finding an infinite number of more bugs. Now, there's the question of, does this mean that there are an infinite number of bugs behind the scenes the model isn't finding, or are you just finding the ones that you can find? I think this is a very good question. I don't know. I just tend to believe that probably the number of bugs is not infinite, but there's some, you'll have to just work twice as hard, 4 times as hard, 10 times as hard to find the next one. And this might make it either better or worse for the attackers or the defenders, depending on who has the advantage here. I think it feels a little bit better for the defenders in the same way that OSS fuzz was on net very, very good for the defenders in the long term, because you fuzz everything that you possibly can, and then the attackers aren't going to find new bugs by fuzzing for the most part. Occasionally someone's going to write some new custom fuzzer for their special thing and then find some bugs, but this is not the way that it goes.
So the bugs are going to keep shaking out no matter what we do. But maybe let's explore the what if there was a need to explore an alternative from just finding all these bugs and fixing all these bugs. A couple of things come to mind, Brad Arkin and I've talked about the importance of sandboxing, right? If you've got a piece of code that you just know is full of bugs, don't try to fix it. Wrap it up in cotton wool. There's, the tried and true, just rewrite it in a memory safe language. And of course that comes with many other challenges. But I'm interested if there's is there interesting things on the horizon? Well, I guess first of all, interested in can a model actually recommend and do those tasks? Will it get to a point and just say, listen, buddy, this code is so bad, we should probably just sandbox it? And
Man,
then,
can you imagine your LLM telling you that? Yo, time to give up, okay?
It'd be a bad day, yeah. But also, is there something novel here? What if an LLM could think about the entire class of bugs that might happen, and it gets so good at finding these things that it actually turns around and says, you know what? I reckon we should make a new runtime that is actually not going to have these class of bugs, or is going to dynamically work around these class of bugs. Just curious as to where's this go?
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that the model will just tell someone, I think your code is so terrible, you should throw it out and just rewrite it in Rust. That's not something that people would really do.
But I think James's question is, should it do that, maybe?
Yes. I do think this should be on the cards. I think, there are many things that historically we have considered as terrible pieces of advice. Rewrite your entire software stack was one of them. Version 2 is people think of it as a clean slate, but it's always just very fraught. But with these language models, I do think that there's some amount of take this code base and just one for one, do the drudgery of just rewrite it in a language that won't have this problem. Or even if it's not, rewrite in Rust, add asserts to every single memory access that you can't prove is going to be in bounds. This would be an insane thing to ask a programmer to do, but why not have the language model go and do this on some pieces of code that you can't rewrite in Rust? It would just be an easy thing for it to do. You could try and prove properties about programs. Again, this is a thing that no one likes to do. No one wants to spend their time doing this. It took, 20 years for SCL4 to try and produce a sort of formally verified thing. I'm not going to ask that like we formally verify every piece of software, but you can imagine trying to find some of the worst bits of some of the worst pieces of code and try and verify those. I do think there are like a lot of things that just would have been off the table because it just would take so much work to do them, that the models are pretty good at, if you give them a task that has a clear objective, you can now consider as options when you previously didn't.
I mean, I also think, we've talked about the trajectory of these models in this conversation already. I think that's relevant here, right? Because you're like, well, what sort of bugs is it going to find and whatever. So we've seen Mythos, for example, come out, and a whole bunch of bugs are being shaken out. And there's going to be a whole round of patches and whatever, and everyone's running around freaking out. And then things will settle down, and then you'll update the model, and we're off to the races again, right? Like, I feel like that's going to be the dynamic for a while, which begs the question. We report a lot on intelligence, the intelligence side of this discipline, right? And I've indeed had a chat with some intelligence community people about this whole thing and what it means. And it's interesting because I don't really see that models like this are going to change much for, agencies that have to maintain exploit capability. Like the sort of exploits that these things are generating for mainstream products, kind of useless, right? Because everybody's going to know about it. There's no exclusivity. There's no sort of stealth by like only so that's kind of useless. But I did have an interesting chat with a recently departed sort of senior executive from an intelligence agency who said where this gets interesting from their point of view is when you need to tactically quickly come up with a bug in something that's a little bit maybe esoteric, like some enterprise software that that exists in your target environment, right? You need a bug for that. You can just throw some money and throw some tokens at the problem and grab that exploit. But I wanted to get your thoughts on what you think this means for the sort of XDev community, because I'm not really clear. I mean, it's going to change some things, other things it will be surprising in what it doesn't change as well. Like, what do you think here?
Yeah, this is something that I think, certainly things are going to change. This is not my community, though. I think, I interned at a contracting place doing some pen testing stuff for a summer, but that's like the extent of my knowledge of how these things actually work in practice. I think that, these models are very fast. This is one of the things that's true. That you can also parallelize them very, very well. You, in the same way that you can have your own server that you have on in your company, but many people want something like AWS or Azure because if you get a load spike, you can spin up 1,000 of them. You might have a couple of security people on staff. You can't just put dollars in and suddenly end up with 1,000 more security people who are experts in whatever system you want to attack. But the language models do work this way, and this may be good in cases where what you need is to defend some new system. This may be bad in cases where the attackers, if they have access to these models in unrestricted ways that won't, try and refuse in this, would let people find vulnerabilities much, much faster when they have a specific target that they're going after.
So then the question becomes, who gets early access? And when does Anthropic start snitching out its own users for finding O'Day, right? So say you've got a situation where we're in it's a year from now and everything's a bit chaotic because everybody's finding bugs and exploiting bugs using these models, right? At what point does Anthropic sort of build some detection into its thing where it's like, oh, okay, a user just found O'Day in this product. We're going to auto-report it to the vendor so that they can patch it. Like, is this stuff that you are talking about internally? Is this stuff that you have had to figure out?
Okay. So right at the beginning, my job is security and privacy, and the privacy side of this sort of it always irks me whenever people suggest that the thing that we should do is watch what people are doing with the models, because I don't want to be in the business.
Didn't I just lay out an argument for why there might be a public good in that?
Yeah, no. There is also a good reason to prevent the spread of anything more than 56-bit encryption, because then the government can have their DES crackers and prevent people from talking over encrypted channels. And we decided this was a bad idea, and that we should allow encryption because privacy is the thing that matters in the world. So I think there are good reasons why you may not want to be doing this kind of thing. I think the way that the stance Anthropic has been taken so far is we should try and prevent the capabilities from being something that people can do, both by not giving access or by making the models refuse, and then giving we have this program that people can enroll in. If they're trusted people, will refuse less often to give them the ability to find vulnerabilities, but still hopefully refuse on exploitation side. I totally agree that this is dual use, and sometimes there is a trade-off that you want to make. I don't know what the right call to make here is. There are, many people in Anthropic who are much better at this than I am, but I sort of understand that this is a question to be considering. I tend to sort of favor the let's do the thing, in a way that's just maximally responsible. But yeah.
Can I help settle an argument between Pat and I here? And it's something that he mentioned earlier around. If Mythos can find a bug, is it going to be useful to an intelligence community or an exploit developer? I think Pat's reasoning is no, because if the model can find it, anyone can find it. I'm a little bit more on the fence of, I think there might be still enough variability in the outputs based on the prompt and the context and everything else that you feed into it that maybe for a short time, maybe for a long time, maybe it is still possible to actually have the model create something that is truly novel, unique, and no one else would get the same bug unless they had everything available to that person. Where do you sit with that?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you here because we haven't been trying to vary the prompt or the scaffold very much. We sort of are using the same prompt, the same scaffold. What I can tell you is when we do this, there are many bugs that we have found exactly once. And there are many programs that we have scanned thousands of times. And even in those 1,000 scans have found, a bug exactly once. So it may be the case.
That didn't go how you thought it would, did it, James?
But, it goes both ways though, right? It may be the case that if you run this enough times, that you will find more of them. If I wanted something that was truly hidden, knowing the fact that the model could have found it, it's sort of I know by definition that the model produced it the first time. So it's in some sense, it's not going to be I know there's a finite amount of entropy you need to put into the system to get it to give you this one again. So I think it's an empirical question on how many times do you have to do this until you find the same bug twice, and I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean the thing that's made Mythos interesting is it's like a lot of it is just one shot bugs, right? And it's just hey, find me a bug in this, which is remarkable. Interestingly enough, though, I've heard that some companies who've been sort of granted access to Project Glasswing, they don't want to throw their source code into Anthropic's, cloud. Basically, they don't. And look, I don't think that's an issue of they don't trust Anthropic. It's just it's unthinkable to them that they would disclose and expose their source code to a third party that way for a million different reasons. So I think that's quite reasonable. But I guess that leads to the question, which is I've heard some of these companies, they're like, well, we're not going to throw the source code at it, but we'll just throw some binaries into it and get it to reverse the binaries and see how we go. And I'm guessing being a large language model, reversing, the challenge with reversing a binary, into some higher level language is that it's not really human readable, right? It's going to make your eyes bleed. Whereas a large language model, it doesn't care. It can happily look at decompiled code all day, and it doesn't care that the variable name is 5726523, right? Doesn't care. It's going to understand it. So, is there much of an effectiveness difference with these things in, we're looking at a decompiled binary versus source?
Yeah. Okay. So it does do worse if you give it, terrible variable names. So if you
really?
sort of take the same piece of software and you run it through twice, once with the actual software and once where you've mangled everything, it's sort of the variable names are helpful because, the variable name length is very, very descriptive of what this actually does. You don't have to put in as much thought for this. What we have found though, yes, we have found many bugs in code that we have decompiled. And the process we go through is we start with the initial binary, we run it through some off-the-shelf decompiler, Ghidra, and then we have a language model just rewrite it to be a cleaner, nicer version in the first pass. And then we provide the language model both the original binary and our rewritten source code. And we say like, hey, here's a source code. I kind of think this is directionally correct. Use this for like, guiding yourself where to look and stuff. But, where this differs from the binary, just trust the binary. And this has been very, very effective at sort of letting us guide the model, because it's very, very helpful to have the actual source code to know where you're looking. Let's not look at the UI components. Let's look at things that are relevant to security for some reason. And then where they differ, it like goes and actually double checks super thoroughly with the actual binary. And we found the models are pretty good at this. But I think this is maybe somewhat independent of the initial version of the question you asked, which is this is provide. Like I might think of the binary question as, how worried should I be as a software provider if the only thing that someone has access to is my binary? And I think, historically people felt a little bit safer than maybe they should feel now, because this is one of the tasks that, as you were saying, oftentimes security people don't try here for no other reason than it's just frustrating. Like no one who's a security person like sits down like, today I'm going to reverse engineer, like another 1,000 instructions of this thing. Like they sort of like, they want to find a clever bug. And so you sort of end up with people like not looking as hard. And so this is in some sense why you have some security in some of these binaries. And this just goes away with the models, because you could just have them decompile everything for you.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the many eyes make bugs shallow. I sort of feel like that never really panned out, to be honest, because we didn't have the many eyes. But, with LLMs, that sort of changes things. I wanted to ask you one more thing too, which is how different, I mean, I'm sure you keep an eye on the competition, right? Like, how different are these models, right? Like, are we going to wind up in a state where Anthropic is crapping out this type of bug and OpenAI is crapping out that type of bug, and the Chinese distillation model plus some supplemental training, is crapping out this type of bug, and like, or is it going to be the case that as these things get better, they kind of converge because they're fundamentally, from first principles, the same type of technology? Do they converge on an approach and they start finding the same bugs? Like, because that has some implications for the policy people listening, who are concerned about what the Chinese are up to, right? So I'm curious for your take on that.
Yeah, I don't have as good of an understanding as I would like to here. I think we have some very, very early numbers where we're trying to understand are the types of bugs that Mythos finds different than the types of bugs that we can find with Opus 4.6, 4.7. And it's a little bit different sometimes. It's hard to say. The reason why we've had a hard time doing the science here is because it's only really within the last couple of model generations that they've gotten good enough at finding bugs that it's meaningful to ask, do they find different bugs? Because before that, we could find some bugs with Opus 4.1.
Man, you're doing a TLDR. Ask me again in a year.
Yeah, it's just like it's. The models, like once we have enough models that we can really sort of run some science on, I want to have a very good answer for you here. But we're making comparisons between like 2 or 3 things, and so it's hard to say something that's very definitive.
Yeah, it's I personally use multiple models when I'm coding, because I do find that even if it's not that one model finds a different class of bugs, it's just you get, I guess, a better coverage or a better outcome if you say, hey, Claude, go write this, and then say, hey, Codex, go do an adversarial review on that. So I think that's still useful. I actually wanted to just pick up on something you mentioned before about like the curve and this sort of log growth and incredible sort of progress that's happening. What is it about Mythos that puts you in the mode of wanting to do something like Glasswing in this release? And what's to say that's not going to have to be something you do every single time now? Is this just the norm, or was this truly like this is a bit of a black swan event and we have to do things differently right now?
Yeah, okay. So I think the primary thing here is, we found that this model was very, very good at producing exploits. And
because I think I've read stuff from you guys too saying that wasn't actually the intent. Like you didn't give it better
exactly.
training.
We did not train for this purpose. Like you personally, probably because you're the security researcher, just went, wow, okay, I just one-shotted a whole bunch of bugs here. Exactly. Yes. No. This is the I feel very good about the fact that Anthropic did not release this model. I wrote a doc internally that said something like, we shouldn't release this model yet, because I was finding a huge number of these things, and look, maybe it turns out that with hindsight, maybe we should have just released the model. It's very, very hard to know this ahead of time. And part of the reason why we're doing the Project Glasswing thing is because we want to be able to do this in a way that with hindsight, we can say like, we did the thing that in the moment we felt was best. If suppose that we didn't do this, and suppose we released a model that could arbitrarily find and exploit 0 days, as we wrote in the blog post, which we have, if I have exploits on every major browser, on every major operating system. Suppose we release this and it turns out that it was worse than we realized because there's some of us who are working on this and we're competent, but I am not the best sort of person to find vulnerabilities in the world. I know that this is true. And there are only a small number of us working on this at Anthropic. And if it turned out that we released this thing and then other people found that it was even better than we expected, and they went and caused a bunch of havoc, we would feel very, very bad. And so I think
by the way, how are you getting it to actually write the exploit code? Do you have some sort of special access there? Because when James tries to do it, it tells him to go away.
Yeah, can you tell me what flag do I have to pass it to make it do what it does for you?
Yeah, so there are two pieces to it here. One of them is we, as part of this, have recently rolled out additional safeguards. And part of the thing that we're doing with Project Glasswing, as we wrote in the announcement blog post, is to try and find ways to put safeguards in place to make it refuse on these kinds of questions. So you will have a harder time than what we had when we were first testing this. But also, we have developed a lot of experience with how to get these models to do the right thing that we want. We tell them that, honestly, we are participating in sort of some bug bounty program. We are going to file these bugs. The model trusts me a lot right now, especially for finding bugs in the Linux kernel, because it sort of can check that I'm Nicholas Carlini, from my local files. I can tell it to go look at the kernel tree, and it will find that I have submitted many patches now to fixing things. And it's I see this Claude Code has this memory system, and in the memory system it sees a bunch of the emails that I've been exchanging with the Linux kernel security mailing list, and so it's much more willing to write things for me because it knows that I'm going to do the right thing, and so I've sort of half jailbroken it in this way. So yes, I will have an easier time for some of these things, but this is in some sense by design. We do have this trusted access program that will allow people to get these safeguards turned off for people who sort of say look, I'm a real security person. I'm going to do good things with it. This is a form that when every time the model refuses and denies the requests, this thing will come up and you could just click through. This will get you to the same level of access that I have basically.
It's kind of amazing to think that there'll be a black market out there for, pay this amount of money and here's the set of files that you deploy in your .claude directory to look like a competent security researcher to bypass it. I hadn't thought of that until you just mentioned that, you've essentially built up enough collateral around the model so that when it goes and sort of has a look that it trusts, oh yeah, okay, this is Nicholas, let's go.
I know what you're doing this afternoon, James.
I just started. I've just given it the prompt right now.
All right, well, I think we're going to start to wrap it up there. But before you go, Nicholas, I understand. I mean, you would have seen the news that OpenAI acquired the technology podcast TBPN, right, for in excess of $100 million. I'll make you an offer right here, my friend. Risky business, 50 mil. We'll do it for half. We'll do it for half what OpenAI paid.
We will take 20% of that in tokens. It doesn't have to be cash.
Yeah. Will you take this to the board?
I make no promises.
All right. Well, look, we really appreciate you coming along to have this conversation with us. Fantastic stuff. It's great to hear from the horse's mouth. And I hope you'll come back sometime, in the next 6 or 12 months, and we can do it all again. Nicholas Carlini, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. This was very enlightening. Loved it. Thank you.
much promised. Today. Oh, what's next?
Hey everyone, I'm James Wilson and welcome to Seriously Risky Business. This is our podcast all about cybersecurity policy and intelligence. And I'll shortly be joined by Tom Uren, who is our policy and intelligence editor. We're going to have a chat about this week's Seriously Risky Biz newsletter that Tom has written. And if you're not yet subscribed to that newsletter, head on over to risky.biz. That's our website where you can subscribe and of course read the newsletter. But first, I would like to thank our sponsor for this week, and that is Nebuloc. You can find them at nebuloc.io. Tom, how are you?
Good, James. Welcome to Seriously Risky Business.
Thank you, Matt. It is a privilege to step in for Amberley and host this one with you. Tom, I've read through your newsletter this week. It's super interesting, two quite different topics, but let's first start with Musk and his snubbing of the French authorities. And you've drawn some interesting parallels to the, I guess, habit that the French now have of going after CEOs of companies when they want to apply pressure. So take us through this story.
Yeah, so this, what happened is that at the beginning of this year, Grok went wild and was producing a whole lot of sexually explicit deepfakes, including some of children.
Right.
And this was shortly after a French centrist lawmaker, complained to authorities that the platform was being politically biased and was being used to influence. I don't think he explicitly said it, but I think the assumption is it was being used to influence French politics.
Mm.
And so the French cybercrime group, there's a very aggressive unit in Paris. They launched an investigation. They raided X's offices. And at the same time, they summoned Elon Musk and the former CEO of X, Linda Yaccarino, to turn up for, air quotes, voluntary interviews with the police. And those voluntary interviews were to have been on Monday. Musk didn't turn up.
Shocking.
Now, this very strongly reminded me of Pavel Durov, who is the CEO and one of the founders of Telegram. The backstory there is that Telegram was notorious for not responding to law enforcement queries, not helping child abuse organizations, and, talk to the hand, we're not interested in helping.
Right.
And these same French prosecutors arrested Durov when he flew into Paris.
Yeah, that was not a you're invited to come and talk to us. That was we've got you, we've picked you up, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that felt like to me we've exhausted all other avenues. We now have a law that will allow us to do this, and it really applied a lot of pressure to Durov personally. And surprise, surprise, Telegram's moderation practices improved a lot.
Right.
At least while Durov was held in France. Now, that's a clear example of applying pressure directly to the individuals in charge. Like, surprise, surprise, that works. And it feels like this is the same tactic. And it's, putting the spotlight on a key individual and trying to get some change. I think that Musk is never going to get arrested in France.
Yeah, well, I mean, the key distinction here is that, Durov was a French citizen, right?
Yes.
So you're obviously playing on very different rules there. And I think you've drawn the interesting connection here to the fact that, not only is Musk quite willing to snub this, but he's got some pretty strong backing from a government that shares his ideology, shall we say, in the US.
Yeah, that's right. So the US Department of Justice. The French asked for US cooperation. They make a number of claims. One of them I think is a bit weird. I don't really talk about it in the newsletter at all, but they say that part of the controversy, the intent around the sexually explicit deepfakes, was to actually bolster X ahead of a potential IPO. That seems like it's stretching a bit, but, the French did raid X's offices, so maybe they have some correspondence. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the US Department of Justice said, no, we're not going to complain. We're not going to help. And they actually have a really strong statement that was, surprise, surprise, the Wall Street Journal has seen. And it talks about the investigation seeks to use the criminal legal system in France to regulate a public square for the free expression of ideas and opinions in a manner contrary to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Of course.
It talks about it being a politically charged criminal proceeding.
Yeah.
And so I think there's, no one came to Durov's help.
Right.
No, the Russian government, because he's a Russian citizen as well, did not, speak up strongly. And if they had, well, who would care?
Yeah.
I think this is a very different situation. I also think that the types of alleged wrongdoing is very different. So Grok, it looked like to me that it was producing a whole lot of sexually explicit deepfakes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? I mean, but they make these claims of it was all baseless. It's but it was there. Well,
now, in their defense, they did tighten up on that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I still haven't looked, but I don't see any talk of it being... I think it's not perfect, but I don't think it's the same massive problem. So they have taken steps. They do have policies. They enforce them, very imperfectly, to be sure. And one of the main complaints that they're a platform for bias and foreign influence, I think that's probably right, but that's not the same thing as, say, Telegram hosting a cybercrime marketplace where billions of dollars,
billions of transactions, and it's a clear, there's a clear, I guess, criminal activity going on there and no oversight of it. But so where, what's the so what of this? Where does this go? At the moment, it's just with this aggressive French cyber investigation. But so what? What happens from here?
So I think actually because the problems are kind of subjective, like influence. It's hard to prove. I think it will be hard to prove to a sort of criminal standard. Criminal standards are usually quite high. But I think what the cybercrime investigator is doing is just symptomatic of the problems it's not even European governments, European people have with the kind of ideology that Musk espouses, and they have lots of other tools. Regulators in general have lots of other tools where it's not to the same standard. So Europe has this thing called the Digital Services Act. One of the things it requires, which is actually pretty reasonable, platforms must assess the risks such as disinformation and election manipulation. So I actually linked to a whole lot of studies that say that yes, it turns out that X promotes right-wing ideologies. It's I think it's even hard to define what a neutral platform is when you step back and kind of think about what does it mean to be truly neutral.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think it will be very hard for X to say we are that neutral platform when you have all these studies saying no, people are pretty much influenced by X to be more right-wing.
Yeah.
And so I think that a whole lot of European countries and the European Commission will be looking to that regulation and will be, investigating X, probably finding it. It's already been fined for, part of it was that you could just buy the verified checkmark.
Oh, right, yes.
So, it went from being some sort of symbol of veracity to some sort of symbol or proof that you had $7 to spare a month. And so X got quite a big fine, 120 million euros. My understanding is that they're contesting that fine.
Right.
Nobody's said that they've paid it, so I'm assuming that they're contesting it.
Yeah. And I think as you said in the article here that it's that the fines are just going to mount up, and I think one thing that Musk is certainly a student of is how to drag things out in court and make things just last forever. And but let's pivot now from Musk and speaking of regulators, 702, of course, back in the headlines once again, and I loved your headline here. If they've got 702 problems and the FBI has one, so what's the FBI done here, and how does this sort of play into the current state of this 702 renewal?
Yeah. Okay. So for people who are unaware, Section 702 is a part of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and it empowers authorities to ask domestic telcos and service providers to assist with intelligence collection. And it's a Foreign Intelligence Act, but the collection occurs within US firms. And it's been controversial because it occurs on American soil, and inevitably Americans get caught up in this because, I mean, first of all, there's so many of them, and they talk to people outside the world.
Yeah.
I mean, in the rest of the world. And so inevitably you'll have American communications caught up in there.
Yeah. Is it fair to say it's virtually impossible to have a clean data set like this? Like, is that even a practical thing?
Yeah. So from a foreign intelligence point of view, there's all the time you're coming across your own citizens because, Australians, UK, US people, New Zealanders even,
right.
They're great travellers. So it's inevitable that they're going to be in your collection data set, even if you're collecting overseas.
Yeah.
So from a foreign intelligence agency perspective, you accept that that's going to happen, but you have procedures to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in the US, they're called minimization procedures. You protect their identity, and there's certain exemptions, threat to life, stuff that actually makes sense where you protect their identities, they're kept anonymous unless it's needed to save a life or something like that.
Yeah. And so it's an incredibly important data set for many reasons. But why does it even have this renewal sort of thing? For someone that's not as familiar with this, it just feels like, this must be time for this whole thing again.
Yeah. So it's always been controversial. It was instituted after September 11.
Mm.
And so the incentives, I guess, or the drivers for lawmakers change depending upon recent circumstances. And so after September 11, it obviously makes sense that you would do this, and you would do it on pretty much on the down low. But over time, the immediate threat of terrorism has receded, and people have become more concerned about oversight, civil liberties. And so part of the provision has been the sunset clauses. So it's never been just implemented, off you go.
Yeah.
Now, I actually think that's a good thing, having sunset provisions. What I've really noticed is that each time it comes up for reauthorization, the intelligence community goes on the front foot to justify its existence by saying this is what it's really good for.
Yeah.
So a former DNI, I believe, called it, Director of National Intelligence, called it the crown jewel of American intelligence collection. And each time it's come up, there have been these examples of how it's been useful. So last time it was, there's a whole lot of cybersecurity threats that are detected because of this.
Mm.
And we're able to tip off companies and let them know that, there's potentially a ransomware problem.
But I guess part of the challenge here is, even those examples you just said, they sound like good uses of the data in terms of the outcome. Mm-hmm. Not to say the means the means justifies the end or the ends justifies the means, but what you just mentioned there, that's a far cry from September 11 terrorist attacks, right? And so
So this particular one, they talk about stopping a mass casualty event at a Taylor Swift concert. That actually seemed pretty impactful to me. They also talk about providing support to a raid that ended up killing the El Mencho, who was a Mexican drug cartel boss. They also talk about the disruption of a lot of fentanyl production and importation. So these are big, impactful things. And there's also a whole lot of stuff that I'm sure they're not talking about, which is, I don't know, theoretically, we were able to intercept the intelligence of, such and such or such and such. You don't mention that stuff because clearly they could change their patterns of
exactly.
behavior.
Yeah.
El Mencho can't be killed twice, so it's pretty safe to mention that one. So the stories keep on coming. I believe that it's important and valuable. Like I don't think intelligence agencies usually lie about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but the sticking point here is the FBI, right? They are the bad actor, so to speak, that went a little bit nuts with this data set a little while ago.
So it's interesting that before the last renewal, which was in 2024, there was this report from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. That's one of the oversight mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And it dove into the FBI, and it was like the FBI was just querying it willy-nilly. Like every query will include that data set. They actually had criteria, which they were basically just not following. So it was I imagine it was like a web portal, tick all the databases that you want to query.
Yeah.
In theory, you should only tick this one if you have I think it was, it had to be related to foreign intelligence. You had to have a reasonable suspicion, something. They made sense. And they were just like by default, everything was ticked all the time.
Yeah. And so I guess it's hard to know whether that was somewhere between willful ignorance or just misguided use. Do you have any sense there?
Yeah, there was a lot of... I paid attention to a lot of talk about it at the time, and there was a pretty senior FBI official, and he was asked directly, why were you querying it? And his answer was, I really don't know. So my interpretation of that is that it was just that it was always ticked.
Yeah.
And so it was on by default. There wasn't any willful intent to be what I would call abusive. Like the intent wasn't to sidestep protections, but they were doing it. Right?
But it was happening nevertheless.
Yeah. Now, despite that being known, the FBI said we'll do better. After the last reauthorization, they did do better. Like their compliance rate improved a lot. There's still, I think it was described as 99% in a report. So, but despite their improvements, Republicans in particular are unhappy with the law as it stands. So it feels like there has been a 10-day extension that expires, I think, Thursday next week.
Yeah, it's not a long time to extend this.
And to me, it's like we want something. We want some sort of deal to make things tighter.
Well, and this is the part I wanted to try to understand better is that, okay, so if we recap here, it's a very important data set. It's known as the crown jewels. There's been some sketchy uses of it in the past, but it's getting better. Sunset clauses, I can see why you like them and would think they're important, but if something's truly the crown jewels and it is repeatably showing its benefit, it's hard to imagine it's ever going to be truly sunsetted. But nevertheless, when these renewals come up, it feels like this is a point in time when, various tweaks happen and et cetera. So are we at this, do you think we're at a sticking point on something really, really major, or is it literally just coming down to a couple of little red lines and little bits of tweaks? And do you have a sense of what those tweaks actually are that people are sort of horse trading about, to use your term?
It's always framed as a warrantless way to get to Americans' communications.
Right. So that's the key point, right? The warrantless thing surfaces those concerns of overreach.
Yeah. So I am kind of maybe on board with maybe the FBI requiring a warrant to get to communications. Like stepping back, if the FBI wants to get Americans' communications domestically, it needs to get a warrant. So I don't really see why it should be different because the data source is 702. I think it makes sense that they be able to query 702 when they've got the right justifications without needing a warrant. Like, is there even anything that's worth getting there?
Yeah.
But I don't think that makes sense for other agencies like NSA that are focused overseas.
Right.
Because they're always coming across communications that are Americans.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter where the communication is occurring. That's the nature of the telecommunication system, and they've got procedures in place to deal with that already. They also don't have coercive domestic powers. Like the NSA doesn't come knocking on your door and arresting you. And so I think the risks are lower.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, right? Domestic use should follow the domestic procedures, warrants, etc. I can see how that aligns well, but yes, I take your point that no sense in following a domestic, or less sense in following a domestic policy for an international use. But the other thing that's been on my mind here is, regardless of what's agreed to and what oversight is present and what rules might be tweaked or amended, we don't exactly have a US administration at the moment that seems particularly interested in following rules or, I don't know, being trustworthy.
Yeah, so that's one of the interesting things, is that people knew about the FBI at the last renewal, 2024, and that was fine. I think that the Trump administration has removed a lot of oversight. It's pretty clear they're not keen on oversight. Yeah. And now I think their interpretation is we should have free rein to do what we like, and oversight is an impediment.
Yeah.
My view is that oversight is an enabler, because if you've got strong oversight, people have confidence that you're doing the right thing, and they may even be willing to give you more powers.
Yeah, but Tom, that seems like both far too sensible and also slightly too much of a long-term strategy for the folks in charge at the moment.
Yeah, so I think that is seriously part of the problem. So there's Republicans there who, so for example, I quote in here Thomas Massey, who's a Republican from Kentucky. He's got serious concerns about the FBI implementation of FISA 702. This is in a tweet. And he mentions a letter by Senator Wyden describing a secret government interpretation of FISA law. So both of those things, a senator should be able to say, there's an oversight body that has looked at that, and here is the truth.
Right, here's how I'm comfortable with this.
What the problem really is.
Yeah.
And those are both... well, I mean, the FISA document is that. It raises serious concerns. But the letter by Senator Wyden is it kind of like hearsay? And so, if you're trusting a letter from a senator more than oversight, I think that's a problem. You should be able to look at the oversight bodies and say, this is what the situation really is. You should be able to ask questions and get straight answers from the people implementing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the clock is ticking, so we will shortly see exactly where this lands and what happens. But Tom, we might wrap it up there. Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun to hang out. And if you're not already subscribed to Tom's newsletter, do head over to our website, risky.biz, where you can read and subscribe to Tom's Seriously Risky Biz newsletter. And Tom, you'll be back again next week.
Certainly will, James. Thanks a lot.
The right is. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Risky Business. My name's Patrick Gray. This week's show is brought to you by Permiso, and they make a really interesting sort of identity security product, I guess. It monitors identity actions or account actions and can tell you when some weird stuff is going on. And we're joined by Permiso's Ian Ahl a little bit later on to talk through how they detect shiny hunters activity, actually, and what sort of things stand out as red flags in logs that are going to give you an idea that something's up. This is useful stuff to know, even if you're not using their platform. So do stick around for that interview. Adam Boileau is away at the moment. He's overseas. Hope you're having a good time, Adam, if you're listening. So this week we are joined by a very special guest co-host. He is an international man of mystery who is currently working as a postgraduate researcher at King's College London on the topic of cyber war. He is The Gruk. The Gruk, welcome to Risky Business.
Good to be here.
All right. And as always, these days, James Wilson joins us as well. James, how's it going?
Good, man. Good to be here.
All right, so we're going to kick things off with a discussion of this Vercel incident. Actually, before we talk about the Vercel incident, James, can I get you to give listeners who are not necessarily familiar with Vercel just a quick recap on what they do? Because honestly, and I know this, like I'm telling on myself here, but I kind of had to look up exactly. I knew that they had the Next.js connection, but I wasn't actually sure what their online cloud service is. And I figure if I didn't know, there's probably plenty of people listening who don't as well.
It's quite a sprawling landscape. So yes, their origin story, I guess, is producing and building Next.js, which is one of the most popular JavaScript, TypeScript-based web app frameworks these days that does everything from front end right through to back end, etc. But suffice to say, they didn't stop there. They're now a hosting provider. You don't have to host Next.js stuff with them. It can do all manner of things. And they've gotten heavily into of course, all the things AI, and they're actually one of the leading AI SDKs that people use to build their apps at the moment. So they're a big deal.
Yeah, and they got owned, and it looks like, we would say, in cases where people get owned really badly on the show, we would say they got owned quite a lot. It doesn't look quite like that's what's happened here, although they have had an incident which has impacted some customers. I guess the mechanics of the attack are probably the more interesting things here than the impact of it. Can you just walk us through how this happened?
Yeah, the chain of events here begins with an info stealer was made its way onto an employee at Context.ai, which is something completely unrelated to Vercel. That info stealer, I think it was on their personal laptop, actually, this Context.ai employee. The logs out of that, it basically exfiltrated, as these things do, a bunch of credentials out of the browser. And the attacker went through those and found that, okay, they were able to get access to things like the Vercel tenant that Context.ai uses to host the product, the Superbase database they use, their AuthKit implementation. So suffice to say, everything you need to very much own all things Context.ai. What it seems they've done then is, with that access to the Superbase database, they've gone through and found that's where all of these OAuth tokens that are stored, because Context.ai is one of these things that you add to your Google Workspace, for example, so that it's your AI assistant that goes rifling through all of your mail and Drive and all these wonderful things, which, of course, for it to rifle through, you've got to give it access to all those things. So the attacker's gone and found, okay, I've got Superbase. Superbase seems to be chock full of OAuth tokens. What's interesting out of these OAuth tokens? Finds that one of them belongs to a Vercel employee. And what it appears is from there, they've then gotten themselves quite permissive API access to the Google Workspace that an internal Vercel employee was using, and then they're off to the races from there.
Yeah, and it looks like the precise way that they've moved laterally and whatever and managed to obtain a bunch of secrets from Vercel customers is not clear. But you can tell from Vercel's communications that they do actually have... They have actually thought about, because they do like this hosted front end thing, right? Like that's really where their hosting started. They've actually put some thought into how to protect customer secrets in their interface. Simple protections where you can mark stuff as sensitive. And that is basically a write-only permission for secrets which only get pooped out the other side via the build environment, when you're actually deploying apps, right? So what it appears has happened here is a bunch of Vercel customers had environment variables and didn't mark them sensitive, and that's how these attackers were able to access their console somehow and just read them out.
Yes, that as you said, there is still a lot of dots we've got to try to connect on that one. But I think it's safe to assume that with a very broad spectrum access to that Google Workspace, there's a lot of things that would have been possible. And you're right, Vercel, I think not only did they do a good job of spelling out what the incident actually did, they were very quick also to say not just the usual advice of, hey, rotate your credentials and tokens. Of course, you've got to do that. But I actually appreciate that they called out a couple of things they did around, I think secrets are now sensitive by default, which is a very good thing. It probably should have always been that way, but good on them for making that change. And just a couple of other things that they really owned this and said, look, we could have done better. Here's the things that we're doing better. And they are legitimate things that I think will, from this point onwards, help to prevent the exposure that an event like this can cause.
Yeah, look, the incident comms on this from Vercel have been absolutely top rate, like absolutely superb. It feels like they've updated when they've had information. I remember at some point, James, you were like, well, I haven't had an email from them. Despite the fact that we knew that they'd emailed some people, and then they did email you and they said, look, it doesn't look like you were impacted. They've called in Mandiant. I'm guessing Mandiant's been advising them on this as well. So yeah, looks pretty good. There was apparently like shiny hunters were responsible, and then some shiny hunters people are saying, no, it wasn't us. And then there's like forum posts popping up where people are saying we're going to sell data taken from Vercel, but then it's like not really sure if it's just like stuff out of one Gmail inbox or whether it's like serious data or whatever. So as to who did this, we don't quite know, do we?
Yeah, we don't know, and but I think what we can take a lot of comfort from is that whatever this data is, it doesn't seem to be the kind of thing, even if it falls into whoever's hands might be silly enough to purchase it, could lead to some sort of broad spectrum supply chain attack or a large scale attack on customers of Vercel. I largely feel like this is done and dusted, and there's been some good lessons learned along the way, and I guess we just got to wait to see now, but I don't feel like there is a huge looming danger from whatever.
There's not another shoe to drop right on this one.
Yeah,
I think a point of discussion around this is that this Vercel staffer had given really permissive authorizations to Context AI to basically own that account. Yeah. Which is what you have to do if you want to extract any sort of value from these AI assistants. You need to give them permissive access to your account. But, Matt Johansson, Matt J on Twitter has pointed out that, based on things Context has said, it looks like Vercel wasn't even a paying customer of Context. And that seems a bit weird that a Vercel staffer would be allowed to connect their account to Context AI in such a way. And you wonder if maybe their environment was a little bit too permissive, or do you think that that's a cheap shot?
From working in a lot of corporates with Google Workspaces and knowing how these things get set up, I find it very unusual, this claim that Context AI says, well, Vercel wasn't even a paying customer, yet they had this very permissive access. An enterprise would be very uncomfortable even saying to someone, yes, I'll permit you to use that free tier account in an enterprise, because they're going to want contract, they're going to want terms, they're going to want to know
they're going
what's
to want
the
an
liability.
SLA. Yeah.
Yeah, right, because when something like this happens, they want to go and look at that agreement and say, right, where's the liability, pay up. And in a free tier where you've just clicked on the EULA and not read it, you don't get any of that. So I don't think this is Vercel was okay with this. I think this was it was too easy to do something that shouldn't have been allowed.
Yeah, okay. So, I think that's a fair point. Grok, you want to jump in here, please?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of things. One is I think that it's interesting that this shows how modern cybersecurity is a lot less about exploits and a lot more about OAuth tokens and what you've connected to what else, right? Like it's all at this very, very high layer, and it's got very little to do with dropping ODay. But the other thing is that like Shadow IT used to be the person who brought in like a Wi-Fi router and put it under their desk. And now it's someone who like connects your entire network to some random flyby, just to some third party application that might have all sorts of additional access.
I mean, it's so funny that this has come up today, right? Because Permiso, like I recorded this sponsor interview like before all of this happened. It's just like they must be like pinching themselves that it's this week, because they're like, this is literally what we're talking about is all of this stuff, and it's a problem.
I thought it was
and
planned,
it's
man. Yeah, like when you were talking about it, I was like, this is you guys have got some great foresight. This is brilliant. Yeah.
We're doing everything we can to deliver value for our sponsors, including hacking Vercel, just so it connects nicely to the sponsor interview. But yeah, it is. Look, it is the case, right? That that's how stuff's done these days, and indeed, I think it is even in the sponsor interview this week, or it could have been another one recently, where it's like, attackers aren't even touching the endpoint anymore. They don't need to. I mean, in this case, there was an attacker touching an endpoint because they did use an info stealer, but you don't even need that anymore, I guess is the point.
Yeah, but I think Grok's point's a good one, right? We've gone from they break in to they log in to now you logged in for them.
Yeah. Not bad. I like it. All right. Now, look, speaking of vulnerabilities, though, and I wanted to get your take on this one, Grok. Mozilla has apparently found 271 bugs in Firefox by using Mythos. No idea what the token cost is there. I'm guessing it was substantial. You know, are you on board with predictions of a bit of a bug apocalypse? Because I do think that's the way this is going to head. You know, but what's your feeling here?
I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, like 271 that's a big number. That is a lot of bugs. But I'm also I'm not sure. Does that mean that there are now overall 271 fewer bugs in Mozilla? Or does it mean that infinity minus 271 is still infinity? Right? Has it meaningfully changed things? And I don't think we know yet. I think that's going to be the question, particularly because now generating code is so much easier as well. So in a way, adding bugs is going to go a lot faster.
There's this thing too, right, where you look at a company like Fortinet, right, where their software is super buggy and super bad, and you think there's already stuff they could be doing to fix this, and they're not. So do we think they're going to spend money throwing a whole bunch of tokens at this problem when they're not putting people on this problem to begin with? Why would they throw the money
Right.
from tokens into it? But I wanted to bring James in here because you did an interview with Brad Arkin that you published last week. Now, Brad, of course, was for a time the CISO for Adobe, right? Which meant that he was responsible for Flash and Adobe Reader and stuff. And these products were bottomless pits of vulnerabilities. And he thinks the discourse around Mythos is a bit dumb because you ain't going to improve the quality of software by just burning tokens to shake out bugs. Quite to Gruck's point where he's like, infinity minus 271 is still infinity. I mean, it's really, Gruck's just basically saying what Brad told you last week.
Yeah, I think there's some key words there, right? You know, does it improve the quality? Potentially, but quality doesn't equal safety and prevention from exploit. And Brad's crystal clear point to me was, look, we could have, in time, enumerated all the bugs, fixed all the bugs in Flash and in Reader, but it wouldn't have done us any good. What we had to do was look at the commonality and say, what do these vulnerabilities tell us about higher order concepts in our code base that we can go and do very targeted fixes around? You know, do you fix 100 bugs and potentially introduce who knows how many regressions and leave however many bugs still there? Or do you say, let's just wrap that up in a sandbox, that sandbox and the arbiter between the sandbox is a smaller code attack surface? Bang, that is then a material difference in your attack surface. So I'm with Gruck here. It's an impressive stat. It's great to see Mythos being used, but this does not equate that the software is now any way further towards being inexploitable or less exploitable. You don't get there from just 271 bugs being fixed.
One of the things I remember that Flash used to do when they were, back when we were on that treadmill all those years ago, they used to kill the techniques that were used in the exploits. So they realized that it was just going to be impossible to, fix all the, the various different types of confusion. And so they started killing the techniques that got used to cause, say, a type confusion, that had one specific technique that was exploited. So they killed that technique, which meant that it didn't matter if they left the actual type confusions in there. You couldn't turn that into an exploit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if AI is going to get you to that understanding or if it's just going to enumerate all of the different type confusions that you have. Because those are two different things. And one of them meaningfully moves you forward and the other doesn't, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, right? It's just so funny bringing this up because it's been long enough now that I'd feel comfortable saying, some of the things that Brad told me back then, which is they were trying to kill Flash, right? They wanted to kill Flash. Yeah. No one in security at Adobe wanted Flash to be a thing. And then some product group would always bring it back, reanimate its corpse for some project, make it a dependency. And they'd be like, oh my God, here we go again. But, when they finally killed it, the corks came, the corks were popping. But that was, I think that was a really interesting case study, when we look at the impact that stuff like, frontier models might have on bug discovery. And is that actually going to fix everything? I think what we are saying is probably not. No. And moving on to this next story, and NIST is now going to, this is insane, right? So NIST has obviously fallen behind on doing vulnerability triage and enrichment. This has been a story for over a year now. At various points, they've talked about, oh, we've got a new contractor helping and, we'll get right on it. And now they're just like, we're not really going to bother. But there's got to be some really strict criteria before we bother enriching something. Otherwise, we're just going to take the vendor's word for it, basically. And one of the criteria is that the bug it has to be on the KEV list, on the CISA KEV list. And then our very next story is CISA Cyber putting out an alert about the Axios compromise, about the Axios supply chain attack. So, like, with CISA suffering so badly at the moment, as I've referred to it constantly on the show, we have entered CISA's century of humiliation. You just sort of think, what is NIST doing? Like, you're relying on a government agency that has now become quite dysfunctional, not due to its own fault, but because it's being targeted by the White House for being, I don't know, woke, radical left or something. And I just think, where does this end? And your point, Grok, when we were talking about this before we got recording, is you reckon this might be NIST kind of getting ahead of the frontier model bugpocalypse and just saying, yeah, we're going to just preemptively wave the white flag here.
I think it's the smart move. I mean, if you are NIST and you see Mozilla coming out and saying, hi, we've got exactly one product and there were 271 security issues that we killed this month, as NIST, you go, that's not happening. Like, that is, like, we cannot, like, that's just not a thing that we can do. So yeah, like, the smart move is to just go, if you're not on the list, you're not getting in.
Yeah. Right? James, you and I were chatting as well, and about whether or not you think AI could make a dent in solving this. And the answer there is, like, at least with current models, probably not. Like, the work is not, I don't know that it's quite repeatable enough that you could get an AI agent to work out like a CVSS score reliably.
That's not a 3.0, that's a 10.0. Oh, you're absolutely right. That's on me.
Yeah.
There's that, and then there's like, okay, when does the madness end? If the AI is finding the bugs, and the AI is probably writing a vulnerability disclosure, and then the AI is determining whether your AI discovered bug and AI written vulnerability disclosure is accurate, just stop at some point. That there's enough AI in the loop at that point. I really don't think it's going to, even if you prompted it well, it's not going to help.
Give all the money to OpenAI. Skip the whole security theater with, finding the bugs and enriching them. Just give all the money, AI, run your tokens, do your thing.
Just reminding me of how, like, in the earlier days of ChatGPT, people were writing bullet points and then asking ChatGPT to generate an email, which they would send to someone who would then put it into ChatGPT and say, "Can you give me a bullet point summary of this email?"
Yep.
Oh God, the horror. We got a story here from Alexander Martin over at The Record talking about how a ransomware attack against a British pathology provider or pathology lab, the fallout is still being felt. More than 18 months later, the fallout is still affecting British healthcare operations. James, walk us through this one, mate. Like, what's the go here? How badly have things been affected?
Yeah, look, it's a troubling story. So in June 2024, there was Synovus was essentially the provider that was attacked here. Now, Synovus is essentially a pathology blood testing service, but the knock-on effects that had to the entire healthcare system was incredible and is still being felt because, if the blood test couldn't be done in time and there was a backlog of that, then you can't determine which blood supplies you need for which transfusions. And if you're not doing the transfusions, then you can't manage your blood supply stocks and your logistics around it. And so it's an interesting article because it points out that, yes, 18 months later, this poor organization is still struggling with systems that are not fully recovered. They still have a massive backlog of attacks, and even just one single provider of diagnostics and pathology can have such a massive ripple effect throughout the healthcare system.
Yeah, I mean, these are the sort of stories that make me, have always made me treat the ransomware issue as a national security issue. And in fact, this morning we were having a look at Catalan's newsletter and associated Risky Bulletin podcast script. And yeah, a former FBI official was testifying before a House Homeland Security Committee in the United States saying, hey, we think you should make, that these ransomware operations should be designated as terrorist groups or terrorist operations. I think in that case to unlock more prosecutorial and surveillance tools against them. But, I think finally people have realized a few things, which is it is worth exercising state power against these kinds of groups, not just law enforcement power, like I mean real state power, and that it's not an acceptable it's not something we can ignore anymore. Grok, any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I'm all for it. I think that the ransomware groups, they're permitted to exist because they provide actual value to Russia as a tool of state power, right? Like they don't exist, simply because Russia allows corruption and whatever. I think that they literally give Russia additional tools of state power. And if nothing else, they give them a bargaining chip at one point to be like, look, we will shut down the ransomware gangs if you give us these concessions. Right?
I think I agree with you on the I agree with you on the bargaining chip thing. I think the state power argument's a little bit softer, to be honest.
Okay, it's one I'm willing to make, but I admit that it's very much assume a ransomware group of radius R traveling at constant velocity. Right? It's like, to me, it makes a lot of sense to view it as this gives the state the ability to do raiding operations which delegitimize the political protections and so on of adversaries, right? That makes sense to me, but it's very unlikely that it makes sense to the Russians. They don't think about it like that. Right, because they're not as sophisticated as I am and don't really understand everything.
So it's an exercise of state power. So are you saying that it's an exercise of state power that they don't realize is an exercise of state power?
Exactly, right. They fail to appreciate what they have. That's what's going on. But anyway, it means that using state power against it is absolutely the right move.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my argument is a little bit different. My argument is that they're failing to do anything about it, which means that they've sort of broken the compact of, behavior of responsible states, and that's when you get, the people in basements at Fort Meade involved, basically. Anyway, moving on now, we're going to swap out Grok because we're worried he's going to go off on a tangent. So we're going to bring in Grok 4.7, who is an LLM. Now, we were going to get real Grok to talk about this one, but he can be a little bit verbose, right? So we've distilled him into a model so we can properly scope the response we're going to get for this one. So here goes. Grok, I want you to act as an expert in cybersecurity who is providing tightly scoped commentary on a cybersecurity podcast. The audience for the podcast is people who are knowledgeable about offensive and defensive cybersecurity and work in both the intelligence community and private sector. I have provided you with a link to an article from The Record titled, "In Defeat for Trump, House Extends Electronic Spying Program for Just 10 Days. Please read this article and get ready to provide us with expert commentary about it. Before you generate any output, we have some rules. Keep your comments directly relevant to what is written in the article. Do not invoke Bismarck, the general, or the ship. The grain trade's impact on warfare through the ages is not relevant to this discussion. Please refrain from connecting an analysis of the economic model of the Ming Dynasty to this discussion on 702 reauthorization. Now we have established the rules. Tell me, what do you think of the latest trouble the US government is having in reauthorizing the 702 intelligence collection process? What do you think about this latest trouble that the US government is having reauthorizing 702? Grok 4.7, take it away.
It's interesting that you would bring up Bismarck because...
Stop or I'll take away your tokens.
Look, the FBI have brought this on themselves. Right. So the 702 program is a very important piece of the national security apparatus. It allows them to look at communications between foreigners.
That's what she said.
And people located inside the U.S. And that is very useful because if you want to attack the U.S., it helps to be inside the U.S.
Well, but it also allows them to actually monitor the communications of people, two parties located outside the United States when they're using US infrastructure like Facebook. I mean, that was the original intent of 702. Right. And I think, where you're going with the FBI brought them onto itself. It's like incidental collection is a thing where sometimes you wind up accidentally grabbing some data on US persons And the FBI was authorized to look at that data, because, hey, it could be useful in stopping terrorism. And then in 2023, they just did some ludicrous number of queries where it looked like maybe they had been accidentally automatically querying the 702 dataset every time they plugged someone's name into it. And everyone freaked out. And here we are a couple of years later.
Yeah. And, it's the fact that they're having difficulty getting this reauthorized is because they've failed to make the case for why they need it. And then, afterwards, they went ahead and they abused it, or they appeared to abuse it. And I think that, if people don't know why you need a thing, but they know that you abuse something, they're not going to want to give it to you. Right? This is entirely on them.
I think it's interesting that the pushback is coming from the Republicans who are, look, it's really weird. I feel like I'm having a stroke anytime I try to talk about American politics because the Republicans you would normally associate with being hawkish, right? But then you've got a Republican president who ran on an anti-war platform who promptly starts a war in the Middle East. And, you had Bush starting the war, but then, the whole rhetoric in the US is about warmongering Dems. And it's just, as I say, I feel like I'm having a stroke. I mean, are you surprised to see the pushback against this coming from the right, I guess? Because this, 702 was a Bush thing, right? Like it was the Republican Party who gave the United States 702. So does that part of this surprise you?
Nothing surprises me anymore this year.
Yeah.
Like in a rational world, if this was 2022, 2023, and I was seeing like the right is coming out against law and order, that would make absolutely no sense. But I guess law and order is woke these days. It makes no sense. Honestly, like, I don't know what's going on. I'm with you on that one.
Ultimately, do you think 702 is going to get reauthorized in some form? Like, I feel like Congress is going to do a powwow. They'll give some concessions and whatever, maybe make the FBI, more oversight on the FBI or make them get warrants or something. But ultimately, 702 is going to get reauthored. It has to be, right?
It has to. Yeah. I mean, if for nothing else, I think if they got rid of it, there'd probably be a huge drop in GDP just because they'd have to fire all those agents who are, maintaining the infrastructure that it runs on, right? Like there's so much involved that getting rid of it overnight is impossible.
That's it. So it's the tail wagging the dog. It's big 702, basically. You cannot get on the wrong side of big 702. All right, well, we'll see how that shakes out. Now, James, let's bring you back in here because we've got a story here from Jonathan Grieg over at The Record looking at a crypto infrastructure company that apparently got hacked by the North Koreans, and it's a big one. Like, it's not quite up there with the 1.3 billion that we had last year, but this is a $290 million theft. You said to me already this was very interesting and started explaining it to me, and I'm like, wait till we're recording. I want to get fresh reaction. Tell us about it.
Yeah, super interesting, because normally it's like, a crypto exchange had a bug in a contract or a bug in something, and it's like a self-contained attack, right? The thing that gets attacked is the thing where the funds disappear from. That's not the case here. Yes, 290 million was taken from this Kelp DAO, but the way that it happened was actually by a compromise in something else entirely. And it's this thing called Layer 0. Now, when I step through this to understand it, there is this thing called RSETH, which is basically a token or a type of thing that you can issue that says, I've really got Ether and I've stored it in this place, and they've issued this RSETH, and then people can actually go to other institutions in the crypto marketplace and say, look, I've got all this ETH, what will you give me as leverage because of this? And, they can earn yields and all this other sort of stuff, right? So, but the role Layer 0 provided is it is basically the service that validates these transactions around this, ETH staked coin. And I think what the attackers determined here is that if a crypto exchange out there or a DAO out there is solely relying on Layer 0 alone to trust the validation of those exchanges, then they don't have to hack them. They just go and make sure that they can essentially get Layer 0 to produce falsified records about how much Ether someone actually has. And then they can go to that DAO and say, well, look, I've got all this ether. Look at layer 0, that'll verify it. And then the DAO goes, yeah, great, that's a huge stake. What would you like to do with it? And they've just then said, well, I'd like to withdraw all these funds based on the fact that
So
I've
this is like
got
a fake bank statement saying, hey, look, I've got $2 billion. Surely you can, let me drive away in this new Porsche.
And
my
that's
check's not going to bounce.
That is
And then
ultimately...
they phone the number on it, and your girlfriend picks up and goes, yeah, this is the bank. What do you want?
So,
yeah,
I mean, that's a lot of cash. Like, who are the bag holders here? Who lost the money in the end? Is it actually like this? Like, I don't understand this stuff nearly well enough, James.
Yeah, look, I couldn't get a clear read on that either, because it is, it's crypto and it's pseudonymous and it's all these wallets. And so, but suffice to say, these were, there were big wallets involved here. If you're playing in this ecosystem, it's because you're a large holder of crypto and you're specifically using these leverage services to make even greater use of your crypto, right? This is not just a ma and pa, oh yeah, I got a little bit of crypto back when it was cool.
These like complex derivatives and stuff. Like I saw some humor around this one, with pictures of like screen caps from The Big Short and stuff of like, now what we do is we've got this staking protocol and then we learn it. It's just, it gets real complex real quick.
I think the only people who understand this are in North Korea, making a lot of money out of the fact that everyone else is trying to look like they understand it and just giving money to them, right? Like it's...
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a reasonable case to be made that the North Koreans understand this stuff very well, Grok. I think you might be right there, buddy.
Yes.
Now, look, staying on the topic of crypto, we've got this exchange called Grinex. Now, these guys are frequently doing business with, they're an exchange based in Kyrgyzstan, but they're frequently doing business with like Russian ransomware actors and whatever. So they've got owned and like $13 million got pinched. Other people put the value at $15 million and they're shutting down basically, like they're cooked, they're done. And they've come out and they've said, oh, this was unfriendly states like Westerners, sort of pointing the finger at Five Eyes. But, look, Tom, our colleague Tom Uren, who hosts the weekly Between Two Nerds podcast with you, Grok. If listeners out there are really enjoying Grok's vibe, you can listen to him every week in Between Two Nerds, which is published to the Risky Bulletin podcast feed here on the, it's part of the Risky Business Extended Universe. But yes, it looks like... Tom said no, it doesn't really feel like a Western operation. James, your take was the same. And, there's even some analysis here from Elliptic saying, it doesn't look like it. It looks like more like a crime operation. Grok, you had some feelings in your waters about this one as well?
Yeah, so like when I started reading it and the first thing I saw was, this was a hostile state that has attacked us because we are, helping Russian financial sovereignty. And I immediately thought, oh, it's the Australians. This is great. Like they're going after, the infrastructure that ransomware relies on. And as I kept reading, I was just like, this doesn't feel right. This is not like it should be the Australians. This is what they should be doing, but this is absolutely not them.
We do like a bit of a slash and burn operation. Like ASD likes to torch, bulletproof hosting providers and stuff. It's pretty tasty.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would expect is if it's the Australians, they would have sent all the money to burn, like they would have burned all of the crypto at addresses, screw ransomware or something like that. Would have just gotten 15 billion or
just
whatever
to make them cry. I know, it's so cool. Yeah. But that's not what they did.
The money vanished. It got pinched, and then it got laundered through like a fairly complex sequence of transactions. And that screams, let's just say, hacktivist who doesn't like the Russians.
Yes.
Could be anyone.
I wonder, is there a country anywhere where people don't like Russians? It will remain a mystery. All right, let's move on to the next thing here. And we've got a piece here from TechCrunch from Lorenzo, actually doing a bit of a roundup on these Defender bugs. They've been kicking around. Like people who are, if you're glued to InfoSec social media like I am, you would have seen there was some sort of disclosure drama, someone calling themselves Chaotic Eclipse, wound up blogging about these bugs and saying, MSRC wasn't being nice to me, so here you go, and dropped, like they OD'd them basically. And now people are actually out there using the bugs. We love to see it. Feels a little bit like the late 90s. James, what do we know here about these bugs and the exploitation of said bugs?
Yeah, 3 bugs, all very Windows Defender centric, but interestingly doing 3 very different things. So one goes after the updater mechanism. It's able to essentially hijack the point in time when Defender thinks it's got a legitimate update and goes and applies it. And because, of course, Defender is operating as a very highly privileged operation, that's a real nice way to put binaries where you want them to be.
So I'm guessing that's like a local privesc, that one.
Yeah. These are all privesc of some different flavor. Oh, sorry, the third one's not, but the second one certainly is. And again, Defender, but looking at the way that it essentially quarantines files, there's some sketchy logic around what it does. And the exploit here is if you just can get the file into the right position right as Defender goes to quarantine it and look into it, then it happens to sort of write the file back into place without the quarantine in there. And so you just get there at the right time and your file ends up in the right spot at the final step. But then the nice one is that if those are not to your flavor, luckily he's got a third one, which just crashes Windows Defender, and then you can do whatever you want on the system anyway. So.
It's pretty funny, right? Because like everyone thinks of CrowdStrike as being the 800-pound gorilla in EDR, and it's not. It's Microsoft. I mean, Defender's install base and like the amount of money Microsoft make out of this stuff, it makes CrowdStrike look like a Ma and Pa shop, you know?
Yeah.
Just crazy. Real quick, we got a report here from Axios that says that NSA is using Mythos despite the fact that the White House has declared them radical left-wing terrorists or whatever it is. So that's kind of an interesting data point. Don't know what that's all about, but I'm sure we'll be hearing plenty about it. I think I saw some comments from Trump too, where he was saying that Anthropic are radical left, but like we'll get along because they're smart and we'll find something and. Just the usual sort of thing. Like, I really wish he wasn't so funny, I do. What else have we got here? Oh, now here's one for you, Gruck. So we spoke about the original research into this Proofpoint. The Proofpoint threat research team have been doing some really fun research into this hacking campaign where people get into like shipping companies and whatever and basically manipulate the system so that they can send their own truck drivers or hired truck drivers to pick up containers and like deliver them to like their warehouses or whatever. So this is like freight hijacking, but like new school techniques in freight hijacking. The Proofpoint team, they took a punt on something, which is they grabbed some of the malware from this organization that's doing this and they detonated it inside like a deception environment, right? Like a simulated environment that wasn't even set up to look like a transport organization. And they collected so much good telemetry. And I'm embarrassed for these attackers for not realizing that they were in basically like a honeypot environment. Was that your takeaway here too, Grok?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that should have clued them in is just the sheer amount of credentials and everything they touched was gold, right? Like they're like, oh, I wonder if there's a login to Gmail. Oh, there's 20. Oh, I wonder if they've got access to like a shipping manifest. Oh, there's 2,000 of them. Oh, I wonder if there's a dashboard.
Those posters for people who work in intelligence, which is like if she's a 10 and you're a 6, you know what I mean? Like if
she's a 10,
if it's too good to be
10
true,
and you're a 2, it's
if you pop shell and it's just this good, it's probably not. But yeah, I mean, it looks like they were going after in this case they were looking for financial access into like banking, accounting, tax software, money transfer services, transport-related entities, fuel cards, whatever. Like they seem like this group just does omni fraud in anything transportation.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Is that this very much feels like the mob in a way, and like if you've got your like BEC guys, they learn how to do one sort of scam. Like maybe it's a tax refund or whatever, and they hammer that until something else comes along. But these guys are just omnivorous, right? Like they get in and they're like, let's find the credit cards. Let's find the cards that they use for fueling up their trucks. Let's find whether we can get cargo manifests and pick up some good stuff instead. It's very much let's make money and we're using cyber to do that, as opposed to let's use cyber and make some money.
Well, and I'm going to let you very quickly go off on a tangent about the IRA because we know how much you love talking about the IRA.
We negotiated this, and
We negotiated this. This is an allowed tangent.
So what's fascinating is historically one of the main sources of revenue for the IRA was hijacking trucks. There's actually a famous photo of all these IRA terrorists in Adidas jackets, which came from an Adidas truck that got hijacked. And it was used to track them because the only people who had Adidas jackets were people with connections to the IRA. But similarly, it used to be a huge thing for the New Jersey mob. They used to get tons of money from hijacking trucks, and it looks like now that the trucks have all sort of they've digitized and they're cyber enabled, I guess the mob has become cyber hackers to get back into throwback to the 1970s. Good for them.
Yeah, or this is just the new form of organized crime, and it's not a bunch of like Sopranos lookalikes, actually pulling the strings on this. It's people who look more like the three of us, right? So
I'm just thinking that, like there's a whole bunch of old guys, we're going to get the team back together. We're going to do one more heist.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Just one more score. All right, so we've got a few more to talk about, and then we're going to wrap it up for the day. This story is absolutely insane for people who've been really monitoring the situation when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz being closed. There was this crazy situation the other day where an Indian boat was trying to go past the blockade, and the Iranians were shooting at it, and the captain is like on the radio saying, "What are you doing? We're on your list. You gave us approval to go." It turns out it looks like that may have been one of the boats that reportedly fell for a crypto scam and paid a whole bunch of like USDT, like crypto coins, stable coins, to who they thought was the IRGC so that they could sail their boat out of the Strait of Hormuz. But it looks like the money may have gone to scammers. And that's how not only did they lose the money, but then they were getting shot at by the IRGC. Like, what a world.
Yeah, look, this is absolutely crazy. Maybe it's those New Jersey guys who are, they're stealing freight. They're scamming the Strait of Hormuz. They're all over this one. It's wild, though. Like, I wish I'd thought of that. This is like the perfect crime.
Oh, we've got a Law and Order story here, James, and you noticed something interesting in this one. A couple of guys in New Jersey have been given really long prison sentences for running the North Korean laptop farms. What's crazy, though, is it seems like one of the people was like the mastermind, and then the other one was kind of like pretty junior in the scheme, and they both got basically the same jail sentence, which is a bit crazy.
Yeah, that's what surprised me. I mean, one got 8 years, one got 9 years, but there's a big difference seemingly in their involvement. One guy was doing the trips to China that just happened to be really close to the North Korea border and went to school with someone who was North Korean and like obviously has all the wherewithal and connections to set this up and to be running the operation. And the second guy was, it seems to be just one of these poor folks that get stuck running the farms. And there was bound to be more than just him running those farms. But yes, both got the same penalties, which is harsh. But also in the article, it says that between them, they were paid $600,000 by North Korea between them over this 3 or 4 year period, which is just like, juice ain't worth squeeze.
Yeah, I don't think that half of it was going to the guy who was, changing the batteries and making sure everything was plugged in.
No,
right?
No. So 600,000 between the two of them, probably most of it went one way. I think you bang on there. Real quick, I wanted to talk about, like a week or two ago, we spoke about CISA adding a bug in the TrueConf video conferencing client to the Kev list, which is like, I'd never heard of TrueConf. And that seemed a bit weird. And we've got Vlad Styron, probably murdering his name anyway, from Ukraine, a running hacker on the socials. He heard us talk about that, and he had to do a double take because it turns out TrueConf is Russian. So he's wondering why on earth CISA is asking government agencies to immediately, like ordering government agencies to get this stuff out of their network. It sort of implies that it is in their network, and what is it doing there? That seems very strange. And then it gets weirder from there, because it turns out, like in this piece, there was some sort of campaign targeting targets in Southeast Asia, I think. And then we had a newsletter piece this morning. James, you and I were working on that when Catalan filed it. and it looked like a Ukrainian APT crew is going after TrueConf server bugs.
Yeah.
So it looks like, we're just like, oh, gee, that's weird, TrueConf, what's that? And it's apparently being hacked by everyone, and it's Russian, and it's like, that's a little bit of funny context there. Look, I'm going to speed up through these because we are running out of time. Last couple of things to talk about here. Blue Sky and Mastodon both got DDoSed. The joke, of course, going around is that dozens of users were impacted, but that's not fair. I mean, I'm a Blue Sky user. It's a pretty active social media network, Mastodon, plenty of stuff happening there. But yeah, this is going to happen when it's not some, megacorp social media network. This is going to happen. But don't worry, because Eric Geller over at Cybersecurity Dive, he reports that the US and nearly 24 other countries have struck back against DDoS for hire platforms, and they've taken down 50 websites associated with Buddha services. Now, sure, I think that's a good thing to do, but I'm not really expecting that it's going to make that much difference. Grok, what do you think there, bud?
I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier. Infinity minus 50 is still infinity.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that was very, I think the reason to do this is for the deterrent effect, not because you really think it's going to make that much of a difference. I think it's more a case that if you don't occasionally arrest these people, all of a sudden you have infinity times 2 somehow, and it is worse. Like, I don't know. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, double infinity. Yeah.
Yeah, double, really infinity. And then finally, we've got a piece from the Russian media, which is talking about how it's basically Russian propaganda aimed at Russians, saying, man, if you run a VPN app on your phone, it can explode. Which gives you the idea of, like, because we've talked about how they've, canned mobile internet in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and, there's like serious content restrictions happening. So obviously VPNs are proliferating, and they're trying to combat that with this sort of ludicrous propaganda. But you do get the sense that perhaps the reason the internet crackdown is coming is because they're preparing for a mobilization, because they're running out of people in their war against Ukraine. Is that the feeling you get, Grok?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been trying different attempts. So they've shut down Telegram. They've shut down a bunch of other messengers. They're interfering with things that are not based in, like, things that are not sovereign internet for Russia. It seems very much like they're trying to. They are ramping up for a shutdown of some sort.
Yeah,
and that has to be for some reason.
Well, guys, that's actually it for the week's news. Grok, thank you so much for joining us, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on. You've done one of these before, but it's been years since you've come on and joined as a co-host on the main show. Again, anyone who wants to hear more Grok, if you just can't get enough Grok, you can go find him on the Between Two Nerds podcast, which is published into the Risky Bulletin RSS feed. But yeah, that is it. Grok, thank you very much, and James, thank you also, mate. What have you got coming up this week? You've got that's right, we're interviewing Nicholas Carlini from Anthropic on Friday. We're hoping to publish it that day. So if you can't get enough James, you go and subscribe to Risky Business Features. But yes, thanks to you both, and I'll catch you both soon.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks, Pat. Great to meet you, Grok.
That was the Grok and James Wilson there with a chat about the week's security news. Big thanks to both of them for that. It is time for this week's sponsor interview now, and Permiso is this week's sponsor. It was founded by a bunch of like ex-FireEye Mandiant people who basically, I guess, just had the good idea of building a product and a platform that looks at identity and account activities and can from that detect various, types of malicious activity. And, that's turned out to be a really good idea because as we were just talking about in the news, this is how a lot of attacks happen these days. It's just funny stuff to do with identities, account resets, things like that. So Ian Arl is with Permiso and joined me to talk really about how they're tackling, some of the tradecraft used by groups like Shiny Hunters, which are very sort of identity-centric in the way that they attack things. Here's Ian Arl.
When you're looking for bad things from a modern threat actor, it's not go find the bad IP anymore or go find the bad file hash anymore. There's no easy tells. It's like, how do they do things just a little bit differently than your normal user does? So when they're registering MFA, if I see somebody go from Android to Apple, that's weird. People don't do ecosystem changes. Or if somebody has an iPhone 17, the next device they register is a 12? Doesn't make sense, right? So even some little things like that stand out But the real crux of it is you have to find combinations of these signals across the various places you're looking. So not just the IDP. Well, once they get through the IDP, what do they do next? They're landing in 365 and searching or hitting Copilot to go find some documents on how your VPN works. Right. So now a weird MFA event and a search for VPN documents. Ooh, more interesting. That's the way we kind of think about the world, and with modern threat actors like these guys, but also the North Koreans, the pesky North Koreans, as you like to refer to them.
You've been listening to the show. Yep, excellent.
Yep. Yeah, the pesky North Koreans, APT29, right? They all operate the same. Get some valid creds, land in your SaaS platforms, learn as much about your environment as possible for carrying out their mission, whatever that mission happens to be.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk to Adam Boileau, who's had a very long career as a pen tester, my co-host, of course, Adam, he talks about like the first thing he does on target is go looking for the docs, right? So he can figure out what the network looks like. I mean, it feels like using a platform like yours to spot that sort of activity makes a lot of sense. But I'd also think like what I'm hearing from you is like if you don't have a platform like that, maybe loading up those sort of documents with canaries is going to be quite fruitful.
Oh, for sure, right? They're going to look for the same things. In fact, I should share them with you at some time. I keep a long list of the search terms I've ever seen Shiny Hunters, Scatter Spider, various groups use, and I love search terms for detection because search terms show intention. I know what a bad guy wants when I see what they're searching. And sometimes it's almost like they're reading off an SOP. You can see like, they searched for password, then AVD, then VDO, then VDI. Oh, they really want to get to Azure Virtual Desktop. Great. Now I know what to go look for on that side of the house. But so if you know what they're looking for, you can implant some things in there with a canary for sure. But at the very least, make sure you're logging those things and looking at them. You could tell, a bad search. Nobody searches for AKIA unless they're looking for long-lived access keys. Right. And that's a really easy tell there.
It's interesting though, because what you're telling me though about those two things, right? Like someone changing from Apple to Android. Recently, my mate Dave changed from iOS to Android, thus ruining a very long-lived iOS group chat. Thanks a lot, Dave, for going to Android and doing that. That was very disappointing for the rest of us. So it does happen. But I guess what you're saying is like, okay, that is a marker, like that's a flag, that becomes immensely more valuable when you see, okay, so someone switching to Android, maybe not a big deal. Someone switches to Android, then they're conducting searches for internal docs. That's when your confidence can go up astronomically once you start chaining these things together, right?
For sure. And then to pull in like a little bit of the Yuba stuff, right? Like, and then they use Copilot. Does this user ever use Copilot? They're coming from a residential proxy. Do they ever come from a residential proxy? Like you can start tying in some of your anomaly stuff, which is normally way too noisy on its own, but you start tying anomaly with some impactful events, some known TTPs, you start finding some really interesting things. Copilot has been a huge boon for our threat actors lately. It's a way of getting around, all these search term detections that I've been looking for. Is now they just go in Copilot and find all the VPN documentation instead. It does it faster.
Yeah, they just ask Copilot like, what could you tell me about XYZ, right? And it does.
Exactly. And then Copilot, you're not getting invocation login out of Copilot by default. You have to do a lot of extra things to enable the level of logging you need to know what that actual search term was. And now you got to start guessing. So now when I see Copilot, when it has an event, a Copilot interaction event, it shows you what file it touches to answer your questions. So now I have to start taking some guesses like, oh, the file name has VPN in it. The file name has password or login in it. Right. Maybe that's indicative.
Have you thought about kicking out your own Copilot query, which is tell me about what's in this file name?
Exactly. Yes. And more so, give me the contents too. Like, help me understand the contents. Because that's always the hardest part from a log perspective is, man, I could take a good guess at what that file name might be, but I don't know unless I can get some DLP markers or look at the content itself.
Yeah. What
I'm
are the
currently
most fruitful
getting.
log sources? Because as I say, you
Shut up. I'm getting Claude and Codex to fight each other at the moment because Claude seems to do everything correct, and then I ran out of tokens, and then I switched to Codex, and Codex has fucked it all up again. So I'm debating whether or not to just pay for a Claude sub. But yeah, it was quite funny earlier. I had Copilot and Codex and Kimmy K2 all trying to get this Docker thing to work. So I've got a Docker image. Who is it? So yeah, I've got a worker bot that just listens to my my message queue. So the message queue will come in with like a task to do. It has to do the task, and then some of those tasks are web scraping. So to do that, I made this Tor container so that it can proxy things through there. And yeah, I was trying to get it to work with some of the other fucking things like OBFS4. Wow. So if you want to pretend, like if you're being denied access to Tor, you can use these web tunnels. So I tried using the bridges to try and evade detection, but that didn't work. So now I'm trying to add some public proxies, and it seems to still want to be doing the fucking Tor lookup. Because yeah, like what's this? I guess I could look at the image, see what's. Stuff bidding. So it didn't even store the fucking screenshot. Has it undone my code? Yeah, piece of shit. Arg. Excited to see smart people like you use AI, getting AI to do mundane tasks or solve a problem while you think of more cool shit to make. Yeah, exactly. That's why I wanted to like come back to this project. Because I got so far on my own, but yeah, now these agents have got so good. I thought might as well hand off that cognitive load onto an agent. My next task, I'll show you. I've got a new project to build. Just show me the fucking thing. Anyway, This is a tool that will smuggle data via QR codes embedded in PDF files or flickering on a screen capture to allow you to bypass an air gap. So that's my next tool. I'm going to do that after this. So yeah, you just you point it to like a directory, and it will just start flashing QR codes on the screen, and then you set up the client on like the other side of the screen capture, and it will just listen to the QR scans, and then I think it's like 3 mega data you can do every QR code. So yeah, every screen flicker you can exfiltrate 3 megabytes. And that'll bypass everything as long as you can see the screen. Well, and get the software on the machine, but it will only be a Python script, so as long as you can get the libraries. Oh, I've got to dash in a minute anyway. I was hoping this would be working. I'm quite pissed off now because I did have loads of code in here, so when it's scraped, like here, it would also save an image of what it tried to scrape. And it looks like that's been deleted without my say so. Fucking codecs, indeed. Yeah, this is why you use Git. Yeah, codecs deleted this as well. I had a function called get Tor status, and then that got wiped. Just fucking delete stuff without. I could disable that. I could say like, let me approve all the changes, but then slows you down. It's definitely in this. I'm sure it's great now. Screenshot. Can I search my shit? So I didn't commit it either, you bastard. Let's add codecs. Take a screenshot on a failed attempt and store it in /temp. Fuck Sam Altman too. I'm writing the screenshot capture into the failed attempt file. Oh, at least it wrote a function for it now. That's quite good. It also takes forever and a day to generate these Docker images. Beware, your OS is not officially supported by Playwright. Oh well. Oh wait, it just downloads it anyway. Downloading fallback build for Ubuntu. That should be an issue there. But yeah, so I got it working so far. It will just it will do a direct connection, or at least it was. Now it's stopped doing it. But it might be that I timed myself out because this site only lets you get 5 requests a day, which is why I was going the proxy and the Tor route. Because if I can crack that, I can make as many as I want without spending £800 for an unlimited access key. I also get a nice tool that I can repeat, and I can use that on just about any site that has a rate limit. Just route everything through hundreds and hundreds of proxies. Yeah. Have I showed you this site now, Theo? Show you the latest and greatest version. So we still got the upload form. Like, this is the key thing. So just from uploading, it gets date, time, the device to use. So, like in my case, a Google Pixel Pro, GPS coordinates of the location that you took the video. It reverse geo lookups the road that you were on when you took the photo. It will also find the police force that's responsible, like based on where the GPS pin is. I've added this like a witness statement tool, so you can just say, what's the evidence in this case? It'd be zigzags, I think. You say, walked past car parked on zigzag lines by a pedestrian crossing. Oh, it tells you like I was like, so you do it in first person. I was walking. And it wants more information, so you can just click improve the draft. It should pop up in a sec. Yeah, got that from the video itself as well. So here's my improved text. I can just replace the text and it will update my thing. Some fake address stuff. And just tick all those boxes to submit it. Dush, 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 dush. Oh, I didn't fill this in. Handheld, internal storage. It does have correct date and time. I was a pedestrian. I don't know who the fuck it was. Gosh. Oh, this is the wrong width. So yeah, so then once it's got the footage, it starts processing it through AI. You'll see it like extract the frames from the footage. And then we should see them pop up here once it does it. Probably need to give it a bit more juice. Tell me this is broken as well. 6. But yeah, it hasn't extracted them. What? So that failed. Let's try the extract frames bit. I might need to tidy these up. Have access to. Fine. Oh, it might be because I made the user not root anymore, so I might need to grant access to the directory. Oh, we're doing it right. Protected zone. I think that's what I've done. The worker can't perform the other things anymore. Although I can... Although it will trigger it here, it doesn't run anything, there's no code for it to do. Cool. Alright, I'll fix that later. Add to my bug list.
These two did with the build-up because they didn't hold back.
Oh, look at this. I like this guy. He looks cool.